Important update about YouTube playlists. Hey everyone. We've received many messages asking why our YouTube playlists aren't showing up. Do we create YouTube playlists? Yes, we absolutely do. So why can't you see them? Honestly, we're not sure. We've been in contact with YouTube support for several months now, but we still haven't received a clear answer or solution. After much discussion, our team has decided to take matters into our own hands. We believe the issue might be related to the number of playlists we've created on a single channel, possibly too many. Our solution? We're launching 2 additional YouTube channels, giving us a total of 3. This way, we can organize our audiobooks better and avoid the playlist visibility issue in the future. This change only affects our YouTube audience. If you're a patron supporter, you can still access all our audiobooks by visiting the collection menu on Patreon. Thanks so much for your time and continued support. Happy listening. With this, we're sure to win, right? Army Marshal Calvi said with delight, lowering the telescope in his hand and smiling. Seeing this, the people behind him also let out a long breath, their expressions relaxed, as if a weight had been lifted. Yes, no matter what means the other side has, they have no possibility of resisting against the flood of 40 million wall titans. Once they completely trample the other side, you can dispatch troops to harvest another world. Ren nodded calmly. This was the final plan he had formulated earlier. Using his future sight ability, he knew the time the Stargate would enlarge. Then, he activated the wall titans that had been hidden in the sea for a long time, having them line up to block the Stargate. Once the Stargate enlarged, they would immediately push forward. On their side, the millions of military strength on the position, the 10,000 heavy howitzers, and the 1,000 battleships on the sea were responsible for defense, using the strongest firepower to blast back any other worlders who rushed in. Anyway, there were enough wall titans, so there was no need to worry about whether they would be affected. In short, it was using the rumbling as the spear and the great army as the shield. Every day gained was a day gained. However, Ren's explanation to the others was that they were ready to occupy the enemy world at any time. Under the temptation of an entire world's resources, these fleet admirals and generals from various countries could only bear the large amount of resources consumed daily. Because in their view, everything they were consuming now would be rewarded tenfold, 100-fold, or even more after winning the war. Where did this confidence come from? The rumbling. In their view, the rumbling was the most powerful destructive strength. The more they feared it before, the greater their confidence now. Alas, it's a pity we can't see the scene of the rumbling ravaging the other world. What an exciting scene that would be. A certain admiral sighed with a face full of regret. In response, Ren, Mikasa, and Levi, those who had experienced the terror of giants, remained expressionless and offered no response. Pure titans were already terrifying. One can imagine the despair the other world would face against tens of millions of wall titans. On the Sea Star World side. Whirro, they're finally here on the deck of a flying warship. Kaido watched the rows of iron-armored steam giants invading, almost in tears. He trembled all over with excitement, laughing wildly towards the sky with an exaggerated expression. The real world war has begun. Behind him, King, also wearing a blue coat, silently watched him act so unrestrained. However, his right hand was already loosely gripping the sword hilt, and the flame behind him seemed to have intensified greatly. Humphrey, since it's a war between 2 worlds, this is exciting enough. The previous 2 were too boring. On the ground, Douglas Barrett used a lighter to light the cigar in his mouth. After exhaling a puff of smoke, he grinned, revealing 2 rows of white teeth in a sinister smile. Beside him, Sir Crocodile did the same. Hearing this, he sneered. Want to bet on who gets into the other world first? Humphrey, is there even a need to bet? You'll definitely be the one dragging us down. Bullet said with a disdainful curl of his lip. Just then, Edward Newgate, standing at the very front, suddenly plunged his Murakamagiri into the crimson ground and took the first step forward. Seeing this scene, everyone who noticed narrowed their gaze. Pew ha 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 ha, Whitebeard, are you planning to make the first move? Garp, standing nearby, burst into laughter. On the other side, Sakazuki stood with his arms crossed over his chest, saying nothing, merely watching the rumbling that was constantly advancing with cold eyes. As a father, isn't it only right to seek justice for a wounded son? Edward Newgate straightened his back, his gaze sharp, anger flashing in his pupils. He immediately raised his thick, muscular arm, and his 2 wide palms, amidst a hazy white light, fiercely tore downwards towards the void in front of him. Quake. Chapter 442, Cheating Player vs. Cheating Player. Crack. 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 Edward Newgate's fingers gripped the air, each grasp emitting a sound like shattering glass. When the muscles on his arm bulged, he exerted force and violently pulled downwards in front of him. The next moment, The space throughout the entire RL 1558 area seemed to tremble. Boom, in an instant, the world turned upside down, the air rioted, and the Scarlet Land rapidly fractured, beginning to shake violently, as if a strong earthquake had struck. But to the audience from all three worlds, these could only be described as special effect, as background. What truly widened their eyes and caused cold sweat to pour was the ultimate destruction displayed. The first 3 rows of wall titans that had just stepped through the Stargate were instantly sent flying into the air, then torn apart midair. Whether it was the high-temperature flesh and blood or the hard iron armor, under the devastation of the tremor power, they were all reduced to meat paste, blood, and fragments amidst the gushing steam. Whitebeard had cleared all the giants in front of the Stargate in one fell swoop. However, the rumbling was originally a biochemical army composed of flesh and blood giants with no intelligence or emotions. Supported by the chilling number of 40 million, they stepped on the flesh and blood of their kin, maintaining the same pace, continuously pouring out from the Stargate. It was as if they were endless, stretching on without end. Fire. 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 On the other side, Whitebeard's move was equivalent to personally raising the curtain on the world government's counterattack. The 4,000 heavy howitzers that had been prepared long ago and the 20 flying warships floating in the air also spewed fierce gunfire flashes from their dark large-caliber cannon barrels under the shouted orders of military officers tearing their throats. Boom 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 boom. Although not 10,000 cannons, they had the momentum of 10,000 cannons firing simultaneously. Countless jet bullets transformed into scorching metal streams mid-flight, smashing down overwhelmingly into the wall titan situation. Because their numbers were simply too great, there were no cannonballs that missed their mark. Rows of wall titans clad in iron armor were like chocolate being pierced, row after row their bodies were penetrated by the metal streams, their heads blown off. The outer iron armor was useless, like paper. Jet bullets could often penetrate the bodies of 2 or 3 giants consecutively, fully demonstrating their excellent penetration power. In fact, Renside had tested with their anti-Titan cannon, a 105mm caliber cannon, and found that although the anti-Titan cannon's cannonballs could penetrate the iron armor on the wall titans, the subsequent kinetic energy struggled to cause effective damage to the main body, let alone penetrate it completely. Unless they used Thunder Sphere. So they firmly believed that even if the invaders had cannons, they couldn't easily deal with the rumbling's overwhelming advance. This was actually a case of relying on experience. They estimated the technology level of another world based on the technology level of their own world. Of course, if the world government hadn't obtained the Stargate, and hadn't conquered the Kabinari world of Stargate number 0001, then there certainly wouldn't be such a thing as jet bullets. In that case, trying to deal with the rumbling with ordinary howitzers would indeed be difficult now. But now, 4,000 heavy howitzers were enough to block these wall titans within 100 meters square inches front of the Stargate. Fortunately, these otherworld giants would continuously evaporate into smoke and disappear after dying, otherwise, a terrifying pile of corpses and meat would have already accumulated there. So now, it just depended on how much reserve of jet bullets the world government had. To be honest, there really wasn't much. After all, jet bullets were a recent development in the past few years. While the inventory wasn't small, it was definitely not enough to deal with 40 million wall titans. In the command department's command room, Minister Khan the Iron Fist, Army Marshal Ryman, Fleet Admiral Sengoku, Military and Political Department Minister Zephyr, and Chief of Staff Tsuru gathered together. These 5 people formed the command corps responsible for this otherworld war. At this point, the authority of the Otherworld Strategy Committee was insufficient, as the enemy had already invaded the Sea Star mainland. Therefore, the command department of the Supreme Military Command needed to take over. Should we stop the cannon fire first and let the giant unit try? Zephyr agreed with Marshal Raymond's suggestion, saying in a deep voice, "Our cannon fire can only prevent the spread of the enemy's colossal titans, but it cannot push them back. I think we can let the giant unit go up. But can a mere 2,000 giant unit really push back against those 60-meter-tall giants?" Minister Tsuru was very skeptical. The enemy's numbers were simply too many. At this moment, Fleet Admiral Sengoku spoke. "And there's a problem that must be considered, which is if our side enters the enemy's world, what if we encounter that kind of nuclear weapon bombing again? This is indeed a big problem." Minister Khan the Iron Fist nodded, staring intently at the live broadcast of the battle situation while frowning in thought. Just then, the golden transponder snail on the meeting table rang. Seeing it, Sengoku, Ryman, and the others narrowed their eyes, because they knew it represented a call from the 5 elders. "Hello, it's me." As the master of the command department, Minister Khan the Iron Fist naturally took the handset without hesitation. However, as Saint Jaga Ursha Saturn's words came from the other end, his brows visibly relaxed. "I understand, this news is very timely. Ending the call and placing the handset back on the transponder snail's back, Minister Kong the Iron Fist smiled at them in a good mood. The problem just now has been solved. Oh? Sengoku raised an eyebrow. Seeing this, Minister Kong the Iron Fist didn't hide anything. After all, they were in a state of war. He immediately relayed everything he had heard. The 5 elders just told this old man that world number 3 actually doesn't have nuclear weapon, but rather a special ability called the Colossal Titan Successor. When that successor transforms into a giant, it will cause a steam explosion comparable to a nuclear weapon, but he can only use this transformation ability once a day at most. The 4 others suddenly understood after hearing this. That's right, Im could finally utilize his unique advantage. Namely, knowing all the key information about the enemy's world. If Ren on the other side of the Stargate was a simulator player, then he was a transmigrata player. Cheating versus cheating. Before, Ren had enjoyed all the limelight and advantage, but now it was Im's turn to show off. So that's how it is. It seems we were overthinking it. If the opponent can only do it once a day, then it's quite easy to deal with. Minister Tsuru said softly, deep in thought. Minister Kong the Iron Fist then added. Besides that, the 5 elders also said that world number 3 has no means to harm Logia users, including that steam explosion. Oh, except for Crocodile. There was nothing that could be done about it. Crocodile's sand element transformation was countered by water. This wasn't really a big secret, as it was clearly recorded in the Devil Fruit Encyclopedia. Then let Garp, Whitebeard, Bullet, and Crocodile lead the giant unit, coordinate with the cannon fire support from the rear, and hold the homeland position. Also, order Akainu, Kizaru, Aokiji, and Armaki, the forest fruit ability user, to take a flying warship and directly invade the enemy's world from the air. See if they can intercept the subsequent giants from approaching and buy Garp and the others an opportunity to counterattack. Fleet Admiral Sengoku spoke his thoughts while contemplating. If the enemy uses the steam explosion, have Kaido and Big Moon lead all the flying warships to attack the enemy's rear. See if we can capture that so-called successor or find the source of this group of colossal titans. At this moment, Zephyr raised a question. Are we overlooking the enemy's future sight ability? Chapter 443, Giant vs. Giant. Future sight? Minister Kong the Iron Fist sneered, looking disdainfully at the giant army continuously pouring out of the Stargate. It's meaningless now. Since they don't have the means to deal with Logia users, the outcome of this war is already decided, it's just a matter of time. He continued, saying, also, the 5 elders just told me on the transponder snail that the key intelligence information regarding world number 3 has been obtained, and someone will deliver it to us immediately. What? Sengoku, Zephyr, and the others were very surprised. Minister Tsuru even asked directly. Where did the intelligence come from? Was it obtained by the Other World Strategy Committee? But why haven't I received a report? She was the minister of the staff department. Logically, such important intelligence should have reached her immediately. However, Minister Kong shook his head, denying Tsuru's guess. No, the 5 elders didn't say where the intelligence came from. I suppose they used some means, or perhaps it was from Cypher Paul. To be honest, both Kong and Sengoku were extremely wary of the mysterious origins of the 5 elders' various intelligence. Tsuru, meanwhile, secretly speculated in her heart. Could it be that Kageya Yubuyashiki saw something again? Indeed. About 10 minutes later, a document of roughly 5 pages was delivered to the command room. The 5 big shots stopped their communication and quickly flipped through its content. Soon, they learned what the Marley Kingdom was, what the Middle East United Nations was, got a general understanding of the international situation in world number 3, and knew the level of the opponent's conventional weapons and equipment. The key point was, they learned what the 9 intelligent titans were, what the rumbling was, and obtained various intelligence information about the Eldian race, the Ackerman clan, and Paradis Island. Not only that, but also exposed Ran Yeager's situation and general ability entirely. It was truly utilizing the familiarity with the plot ability of a transmigrator to the extreme, directly giving their own world government a cheat called spoilers. Exploration intelligence. No need. Everything that needed to be known, provided directly, completely dispelling the worries of Kong, Sengoku, Tsuru, and the others. This intelligence was equivalent to telling them, don't be afraid, the opponent's strength is not strong, go all out and fight. A moment later, the 5 saw the last 2 sentences of the document, or rather, the order that was issued. Namely, all participating troops in world number 3, except for Eldians and Ackermans, are not to be taken as captives. The political regimes of all participating countries are not to exist. Furthermore, Ren Yeager is to be captured alive and publicly executed on a chosen day for all worlds, including world number 3, to witness via public broadcast, as punishment for the serious crime of killing an army general. The power of the Titans. There's actually such a thing, a power inherited by devouring the living body of the previous host, truly disgusting. Zephyr said with a face full of disgust after reading. Marshall Raymond also said with a wry smile, and these pure Titans and wall Titans, aren't they just walking corpses? If the giant tribe of Elbaf knew, they would probably be very full of anger, right? Minister Tsuru showed a charming smile and commented. However, the special abilities of these 9 intelligent Titans are quite good. For example, this Beast Titan, based on the description, is very much like an awakened user of the animal system. So that's it, that troublesome future sight ability of the opponent comes from this. Sengoku was particularly focused on the future sight aspect. Overall, Ren Yeager's simulator is actually a combination of the memory transferability of the Founder Titan, the Attack Titan's ability to view Descendant host memory, and the ability to view previous host memory shared by all Titan shifter hosts. The present Ren can see the memory of the future Ren, or the future Ren can transmit his experiences to the past Ren to view in the form of memory. If the past Ren makes changes that cause fate to change, there will still be a future Ren formed by this change, continuing to provide memory to the present Ren. Therefore, calling it an infinite simulator is completely accurate, it's just that outrageous. Theoretically, any transmigrator without a cheat that can block Ren's ability would definitely be tormented to death by Ren. It can be said that in this regard, Ren is actually considered a god in this world. On the Red Earth battlefield of RL 1558, the 4,000 heavy howitzers had stopped firing, because continuing to fire would likely hit the big shots in front. Crack. Rumble, the ultimate tremor power transformed into a hazy white light, sweeping out as the Murakamagi Reed blade swung. Wherever it passed, the air shattered layer by layer like glass. In an instant, hundreds of 60-meter-tall iron-armored giants within a large area turned into shattered meat and remnants. The turbulent air rolled up billowing steam and swept across the entire scene. One could see Edward Newgate Whitebeard, clad in a black justice coat, leading the charge at the very front, pushing back the rumbling's momentum step by step towards the massive Stargate with the strength of one person and one blade. Such terrifying destruction was worthy of his title, World's Strongest Man. The tremor fruit in his hands was also worthy of the name, power capable of destroying the world. Even Garp, who was freely swinging his fists not far away, each punch capable of blowing apart a dozen wall titans in a line, could hardly compete with Newgate for the spotlight at this moment. However, the rumbling is the rumbling. Their greatest advantage is their endless quantity. More and more wall titans, no longer covered in iron armor, with exposed pink muscle, dispersed left and right as soon as they stepped through the Stargate, rapidly spreading out. It was like a red torrent shrouded in steam encountering the 2 giant stone obstructions, Whitebeard and Iron Fist, and having to bypass a portion, deterring from the sides. This caused the entire battle line to expand at a speed visible to the naked eye. It must be said that the 60-meter body size and exposed muscle form of these wall titans were indeed terrifying to behold. It was as if countless oars the daemon were advancing in neat columns, coupled with the rumbling sounds they made every time they stepped on the ground. The sense of oppression was maxed out in the left zone of the medium Stargate. A roar filled with intense anger echoed throughout the field. Let these brainless walking corpses see what a giant truly is, and what the power of the giants truly is. King Harold of the Elbaf Kingdom, holding a giant spear gleaming with dark metal light, stood at the front of the giant unit composed of 2,132 giant warriors. As soon as he finished speaking, he was the first to transform into a pitch-black lightning bolt and charge towards the imposing the rumbling. Kill. Following closely, the more than 2,000 giant warriors, swinging their black justice coats behind them, roared and charged forward fearlessly in a group, wielding giant swords and giant axes. Rumble, 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 in the blink of an eye, on the Red Line's Earth, with the massive Stargate as the background, the giant legions from 2 different worlds fiercely collided. Although the giant tribe of Elbaf were far inferior to the wall titans in terms of body size, they could run, jump, and some even mastered moonwalk, allowing them to skywalk. Their mobility completely crushed the opponent. Moreover, their strength was even more powerful. Every time they swung their blood-patterned weapons, which were covered with a layer of Kabinari heart membrane, they could easily cut off the lower legs or necks of the wall titans. Of course, if they were accidentally stepped on by a wall titan, they wouldn't feel good either. Crucially, the high-temperature steam that occasionally erupted from their bodies caused considerable trouble for the Elbaf giants. Wonderful, spectacular, so beautiful. In the high altitude, Morgans held a visual Dendenmushi with an excited face, clearly filming the giant war raging below, allowing people from the 3 worlds to witness a battlefield scene comparable to myths and legends. Chapter 444, Borslino's Otherworld Debut. On the Red Earth battlefield to the right of the medium Stargate, bursts of purplish-blue energy continuously erupted, engulfing one wall titan after another. From time to time, swift-moving black figures flashed by. They seemed to use some kind of elastic black line as a medium, agilely leaping, maneuvering, and pulling back and forth between the 60-meter-tall giants, before using black arm blades to cut off their massive heads. 3 big shots, the order from the command department has arrived. It requires us to immediately enter the enemy world. The mission is to attempt to intercept the subsequent troops of the rumbling from continuing to pour into the Stargate, and to force out the steam explosion of the colossal titan. Hearing the message from the person behind them, Sakazuki, Borsellino, and Kyuzen, who were standing side by side observing the combat posture of the Kabaneri troops below, turned in unison and calmly looked at the Logia system newcomer named Arakawa. Arakawa, who had originally been grinning playfully, was startled by their intense gaze and became flustered, thinking to himself, "Did I disturb them?" Fortunately, he was just overthinking. The 3 of them withdrew their gaze and continued watching the combat below, letting the flying warship beneath their feet carry them continuously towards the Stargate. It was clear that the group of experts on the ground were not using their full power. Aside from Edward Newgate and Marco, who were slightly more serious due to their anger, whether it was Garp, Kaido, Big Mom, or Bullet, Crocodile, and King, they were basically still in the warm-up phase, or rather, they were enjoying the pleasure of clashing with other world troops numbering in the tens of millions. Otherwise, if these people were to go all out and activate their awakening, these otherworld giants would have long been annihilated, and they would have counterattacked into the opponent's world. As for that steam explosion, it could only be said that there were some concerns, but not enough to make them overly cautious. After all, what level was Bandai World's hockey? How many among these people didn't know? Its power, which couldn't even kill mere Diamond Jazu, might not have much effect against people whose hockey level truly reached Admiral-level combat power, such as Garp, Newgate, Linlin, Zephyr, and Sengoku. 2 lakhs. A bunch of guys treating the battlefield like a game. Sakazuki snorted unhappily, holding his hands across his chest. Borsellino beside him tilted his mouth and teased. After all, we're still on our own territory. If these guys really got angry, this zone RL-1558 could be blown away, couldn't it? That scene would definitely be terrifying. And Kyuzen remained silent. He couldn't help it. Standing with these 2, he felt a bit uncomfortable because he was still just an admiral candidate, which was somewhat awkward. Meanwhile, Armaki stood honestly behind them, acting as the most dutiful subordinate. There was nothing he could do. Leaving aside that he was just a small army colonel, even though he was also a Logia user, he hadn't awakened at all. As for hockey and martial arts, A few minutes later, this flying warship quickly swept over the heads of the densely packed wall titans from a high altitude. The steam rising up made the surrounding environment hazy and white, as if they were deep within clouds and mist. Fortunately, the wind barrier on the outer perimeter of the warship isolated all the steam, preventing the hot and humid air from rushing into the ship. For this, they had to thank Dragon, who was far away on the Sabati archipelago. Wow! The second the flying warship passed through the Stargate at 200 meters above high altitude, Borsellino instinctively let out an exclamation, as if he had seen something shocking. In fact, that was exactly the case. Looking down at the lowest ground below, as far as the eye could see, a pink torrent composed entirely of wall titans with exposed muscle was moving forward in an unstoppable, uniform stride, its endpoint being the vast coastline in the distance. It was as if there was a giant's gate existing in the deep sea, constantly spitting out giants onto the land. So many, there were simply too many of them. Every step they took caused a commotion that was enough to make the ground tremble grayly, raising smoke and dust, coupled with the surging white steam that covered heaven and earth. Even Sakazuki, at this moment, couldn't help but be moved. This scene was too shocking. It wasn't just them. Through the visual Den Mushi live broadcast on the warship, all the citizens on the Sea Star mainland, in the Kabaneri world, and in the Demon Slayer world were now dumbfounded, as if petrified, watching the dense, countless sea of giants in fear. Let alone tens of millions, even 1,060-meter tall giants standing together would be a terrifying scene covering mountains, plains, and the land. At this moment, the world government completely understood what the rumbling was. Can we really win? In the plaza on the Sabati archipelago, an ordinary middle-aged man muttered to himself. An emotion called fear gradually spread among the crowd. Whoosh 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 whoosh. Just then, a dense whistling sound cut through the air, startling everyone watching the live broadcast and attracting the attention of the 4 people on the flying warship. So that's it. The other side knew we would come in advance, so they started firing early. It's really not easy to dodge in this situation. Borsellino placed his right palm on his forehead, looking with interest at the 10,000 howitzer shells shooting towards them. Although the speed of these shells was extremely astonishing, ordinary people couldn't see anything at all. But for him, who was best at observation hockey. They were like slow motion in his perception world. Well then, I'll make the first move. After saying that, Borsellino didn't wait for anyone's response. Along with the blue coat on his body, he transformed into a golden flash and disappeared. The next second, he appeared in a sky 1,000 meters above, and then his entire body underwent element transformation and expanded, turning into a huge, four-pointed star-shaped brilliant golden light. Yasukani no Magatama. Suddenly, a second sun appeared in the sky, adding a touch of white and faint gold to the already bright heaven and earth. At this moment, no one could open their naked eyes. Whoosh 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 whoosh, countless golden beams met the 10,000-round barrage of heavy howitzers, colliding continuously in the clear blue sky like two armies clashing. Innumerable balls of fire exploded all over the sky amidst the continuous deafening roar. This was a firepower competition between technological power and superpower. 10,150 mm caliber heavy howitzers versus Air Force Admiral Kizaru's 10,000 light beams. Roar 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 roar, both sides seemed evenly matched. However, as the time of the exchange of fire grew longer, Sakazuki and Kyuzen could clearly perceive that Yasukani no Magatama was constantly pushing forward. Until the continuous stream of light beams completely cleared all the incoming shells, and then landed on one of the opponent's artillery positions. Huge, bowl-shaped balls of fire completely destroyed, engulfed, and pulverized nearly 3,000 heavy howitzers in the surrounding area. The reason was simple. The gap lay in the frequency of attack. Heavy howitzers averaged only 6 to 7 rounds per minute, while Kizaru's side was incalculable. Not only that, Kizaru also had the assistance of observation hockey, which was comparable to guidance radar, allowing each light beam to precisely pierce 2 to 3 howitzer shells along a single line, and even further follow the shell's trajectory to find the opponent's position. This scene completely stunned Marshal Colvey of the World Alliance Army, Admiral Theo Magoth, and the generals from various countries. When had they ever seen such an incredible sight? However, for some unknown reason, there were no people from the Eldian Empire side left in this command room. Or rather, did Ren, Mikasa, and Levi leave in advance? And where was Mr. Willie Tibber? Chapter 445, Natural Disaster versus the Rumbling. In the Titan world, thousands of meters high above the medium stargate, golden flashes danced across the sky. Borsellino, relying solely on his own strength, intercepted all the incoming shells and the ship cannonballs fired from the 1,000 heavy battleships on the sea. At this moment, he had dispersed his Yasukani no Magatama and was instead holding a Nama no Morakamo, while simultaneously pushing his flash speed to the extreme. His speed was so fast that it drew golden straight lines across the clear blue sky. They were dense, like a spider web, or even like messy lines drawn randomly by a child with crayons, but it was these chaotic golden nets that blocked all attacks. This incredible and magnificent scene gradually restored the confidence of the audience on the Sea Star mainland. That's right. They still had an admiral on their side. Strange, why hasn't that Ren steam explosion appeared yet? At this moment, Sakazuki withdrew his gaze from Borsellino, a look of confusion appearing in his eyes as he surveyed the surroundings. He still wanted to personally experience just how powerful the ability that could kill Bandai World was. It wasn't just him, the world government higher-ups watching the live broadcast also had the same thought. That's not right. In the command room of the command department, Sengoku suddenly spoke, drawing the attention of the other four. He then said in a low voice, since that Ren possesses such a powerful future sight ability, he must have already seen that steam explosion wouldn't have much effect on Sakazuki and the others. In this situation, he naturally wouldn't send that colossal titan over again, wasting the one transformation allowed per day. Because that would be meaningless and would instead put his companions in a dangerous situation. Based on the intelligence provided by him, they naturally assumed that the current host of the colossal titan was still Armin. From this perspective, his transmigrator's profitability also had certain limitations, as he was only familiar with and understood the canon content. What about the other titan shifters? Why haven't we seen a single one? Zephyr stroked his chin in thought as he asked. Immediately after, Saru beside him answered him, guessing softly. They might still be staying in the rear, acting as the defense force guarding the command center. The other side probably feels that with the scale of the rumblings situation, they don't need other titan shifters to participate. In that case, there are no more reservations. This old man will immediately order Kaido and Big Mom to lead the Air Force fleet to break through the Stargate. At the same time, the ground combat power can also launch a full counterattack and push the war back into their world. As the minister of the command department, Kong the Iron Fist immediately made the decision without the slightest hesitation or delay. Without another word, he picked up a transponder snail and issued the order to the front-line battlefield. Full counterattack. These 4 words were not only directed at the officers of the Army, Marines, and air force on the battlefield, but were also conveyed to Tesoro and Stella, who were responsible for the commentary in the broadcasting hall, by the propaganda department via writing on a cardboard sign after receiving the news. Thus, the countless citizens of the Sea Star world, Kabanari world, and Demon Slayer world also learned of this latest order from the command department. This caused the eyes of many people to flash with expectant radiance. Were Roma Mama on the Red Earth battlefield in the RL 1558 area, the first to act were naturally the 19 flying warships in the sky. They quickly flew towards the Stargate amidst the unrestrained laughter of Kaido and Linlin. These two had been completely ignited by the battlefield atmosphere, their hearts filled with hot blood. A cross-world war on the rank of tens of millions, this was something they couldn't have even imagined before. Especially a war maniac like Kaido, who was now incredibly grateful that he had yielded in Impel Down back then. Otherwise, how could he have such an exciting life? Meanwhile, in the Titan world on the other side of the Stargate. Eralala, well then, I'll take care of the sea. I'll clear out the trash below. Sakazuki and Kyuzen discussed for a few sentences and divided their respective missions. This left Taramaki somewhat at a loss, asking, "Okay, and you, Admiral, what about me?" He was an army headquarters colonel, so he directly sought instructions from Sakazuki, who was an army general. Just as Kyuzen transformed into a white shadow and leaped out of the flying warship, Sakazuki glanced sideways at him and commanded, "You go and eliminate the enemy's artillery emplacement. Try not to destroy the cannons, they are already ours, the army's." Yes. Seeing that he finally had something to do, Aramaki's raised heart settled down. Moreover, he was very satisfied with this mission. Immediately, without another word, he also leaped out, and then behind him, he generated a large pink flower with automatically high-speed rotating petals, using its ability to fly steadily towards the World Alliance Army's position. Sakazuki stood at the deck edge, his gaze deep as he looked down upon this land and giants belonging to another world. He had actually thought before, what was the fundamental difference between invading another innocent world without any conflicts for resources or various interests through a Stargate like this, and those pirates? At first, this question bothered him quite a bit. Later, he chatted a few sentences with Borsellino, who had been transferred to the Air Force, using a transponder snail. There was no other way. Only this old friend from North Blue, who had joined the Marines at the same time as him, could have an equal dialogue with him. He was considered his only friend. He remembered asking Borsellino at the time, saying, "What's the difference between us invading another world and pirates invading a town?" It was a bit blunt, but that was Sakazuki's personality. When it wasn't necessary, he didn't have so many tricks. Then he heard Borsellino casually say in a nonchalant tone, "Difference, probably that we are the military, and pirates are just pirates." This sentence instantly enlightened Sakazuki. Indeed, soldiers conquering another side for the interests of their own influence is actually an act of justice for their own side. Then, are pirates also acting for their own interests, and is that also justice? Of course not. Why? Because they are not legal. Why do the Marines arrest, or even kill, pirates? Isn't it because the latter have broken the law and committed crimes? Sakazuki's thoughts were manifold, as if he had fallen into a memory, but his actions showed no hesitation. His upper body had already begun to emit scorching dark red magma and rolling black smoke filled with the scent of sulfur. He slowly raised his completely element-transformed arm and declared with an incredibly firm voice, "My justice is absolute. Meteor. Volcano." The next moment, spraying sounds exploded continuously, and magma bullets flowing with terrifying magma shot into the sky at an extremely high frequency and speed. This added a few shades of fiery red to the blue sky that was already filled with golden light. Even the surrounding air became much hotter, causing Kizaru, who was having a blast playing with countless cannonballs above, to wryly twist his mouth in annoyance. But he still gave face and allowed these magma bullets to fly past him, and then, after expanding to the size of houses, they fell like meteorites. Honestly, if he hadn't given face, not a single one of these magma bullets would have been able to form. Roar. 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 One after another, huge magma masses with a diameter of over 10 meters smashed into the rumblings situation. The surging fluid magma was like a hot, towering tsunami, completely engulfing rows upon rows of wall titans that didn't know how to dodge. No matter how high temperature the steam was, how could it compare to magma? Not to mention that the magma from the Logia system magmag fruit is a supernatural magma that can even swallow flame. Gradually, as Sakazuki continued to spray magma bullets, the peninsula area behind the medium Stargate visibly transformed into a magma lake at a speed visible to the naked eye. This was the collision between a natural disaster and the rumbling. Chapter 446, M's confusion about Ren. Rumble, rumble, just as countless magma mass were continuously falling from the sky, creating a scene like the arrival of doomsday hell. Q's, riding on the ice storm pheasant he created, arrived above the northeast side of the bay. Don't ask why an ice sculpture made of ice cubes can fly. These terrifying giant of the earth, are they really endless? This number is a bit outrageous, isn't it? Q's looked down with emotion at the wall titan still continuously emerging from the sea. They mechanically lined up in a vast, mighty queue, walking step by step into the doomsday hell that had already become a magma world. Otherworld, each one truly has peculiar things. Just then, urgent artillery fire sound and whistling sound reached his ears. Q's quickly controlled the ice storm pheasant beneath his feet to rapidly flap its ice wings, tumbling up and down within the crisscrossing firepower net formed by countless anti-aircraft gun, narrowly avoiding the pursuit of one cannonball after another. La, that was really dangerous, but it's time to get to work. He sighed with a helpless expression, touching the back of his head, but immediately adjusted his mindset. His gaze and expression quickly calmed down, and at the same time, he slowly bent down into a half-crouch, his right hand palm pressed against the incredibly cold back of the ice storm pheasant. Ice Age, Chew, the lifelike giant ice bird first let out a cry, then opened its sharp, long bird beak while flying at high speed, spraying a stream of extremely cold frost-white cold air towards the sea surface below. The surging sea waves that were originally continuously rushing forward instantly turned into frost and solidified in place the moment they came into contact with the cold air, spreading out at an unbelievably fast speed. The speed of the ice freezing was too fast. The Marine officer on the nearly 1,000 heavy battleship and the nearly 10,000 Marine soldier only felt a cold wind blowing towards them before instantly turning into humanoid ice sculpture. From Cuzin's viewpoint, the entire bay below had now become a frozen polar region. When the wind blew from a distance, it immediately turned into a rolling cold wind. However, he didn't care about these warship, because they were just incidental. The key was to completely ice seal the wall titan hidden beneath the sea, preventing them from continuing to advance towards the Stargate. As expected. When Ice Age froze the seabed as well, no more wall titan followed, indicating that the source of the rumbling had been completely cut off. But just as Qzin thought the mission was complete and was riding the ice storm pheasant back towards the Stargate, he received a phone notification from the command department. Fleet Admiral Sengoku told him that rows of wall titan were approaching from the northwest and southeast directions of the peninsula, and ordered him to immediately go and check the situation. So that's it. Did that Ren know in advance that I would ice seal the sea surface here, so he distributed these giant on the seabed in different directions? Qzin immediately personally experienced the feeling of being anticipated and calculated by someone, and also felt Ren's desire to do his best to delay. What else could he do? What a troublesome ability. Sigh. He could only let out a long sigh and control the ice storm pheasant beneath his feet to fly towards the destination. At the same time, 19 flying warship formed a formation and flew out of the 300-meter-high medium Stargate one after another. On the leading flying warship's warship deck, Kaido and Linlin stood side by side. Prometheus and Zeus played and laughed carefree in midair, like innocent child. Behind them were the current Air Force Vice Admiral Marco and King. Every time Charlotte Linlin saw them, she would secretly sigh in her heart, why didn't any of her child specialize in flying? The Whitebeard Pirates and the Beast Pirates both had powerful individuals who could join the Air Force headquarters, but their Big Mom Pirates didn't. She felt this was unreasonable. But there was nothing she could do. However, she had already decided in her heart that she must quickly give birth to a flying child who could rival Marco and King, or pick one from her existing non-ability user child, and then find a way to get him a devil fruit that could be used for aerial combat. Marco is an animal system mythical zone, and King is an animal system ancient zone. Then my mama's child certainly can't be a regular animal system. It's best to be a Paramsha system. Paramsha system devil fruit have greater potential. While Charlotte Linlin's thoughts were drifting, Kaido, on the other hand, was staring intently at the peninsula land behind the Stargate that had completely turned into magma hell, and the vast sea surface further away that had turned into a frozen polar region. It must be said, in terms of the scope of destruction in war, Logia system Awaken user truly have a great advantage. They are truly strategic weapon-level existences. However, he quickly withdrew his terrifying gaze, letting out a light snort in his heart. In terms of improving one's own strength, animal system devil fruit are still the best. So-called strength and weakness should be determined by head-on clashes, not by flashy, strange means. In Kaido's heart, the animal system mythical zone devil fruit was the most perfect devil fruit. It combined the characteristics of the animal system, Paramsha system, and even the Logia system. Among them, the Azure Dragon fruit he ate was the king among mythical zone. Thinking of this, the gaze he directed towards Charlotte Linland beside him carried a not-so-obvious sense of gratitude and affection. Suddenly, Kaido and Big Mom simultaneously raised their heads, looking in surprise towards the west direction. Just as the 19 flying warship had left the Stargate not long ago, from behind the World Alliance Army's position, a series of sharp conical, peculiar cannonball with bright flames spraying from their rear ends flew out. Their number was in the thousands, and they were unbelievably fast. Visually, each one had a flight speed close to the speed of sound. The firepower was visibly fierce. "What is that thing?" Charlotte Linland asked curiously, but Kaido had no idea. However, back on the Sea Star mainland, on the Moon immediately recognized it. An expression of astonishment appeared in his gaze. Rocket launcher? Felt it was somewhat unbelievable. He didn't understand why he would see such advanced weapons and equipment as rocket launcher in the Titan world. He wasn't a military expert or a heavy military enthusiast before he transmigrated, but he still felt that such mature rocket launcher shouldn't be something this world possessed. One must know, the power of this thing was much greater than howitzer. Besides, don't rocket launcher require a guidance system? Oh, they really don't need one. With Ren's future sight ability, they can completely aim at the Stargate, or even the position of the flying fleet, in advance. Was speechless, but he still felt confused in his heart. How exactly did the technology tree of the Titan world branch out? Or did he miss something when he was watching? However, he also realized the thinking behind the other side's operation plan. First use heavy howitzer to lure Kizaru away, then use the heavy battleship on the sea as bait to lure Aokiji away, and finally bring out the rocket launcher to deal with Sakazuki, Kaido, and Big Mom. Was even slightly moved by the Titan world's desperate struggle. They were truly racking their brains and giving their all to resist their side. But why? Since Ren can see everything in the future, logically, he shouldn't be so resistant to the world government, right? Why say that? Because from the world government's stance and interests, the Eldian, a high-value race that can inherit the power of the Titans, would definitely be heavily supported after the initial conquest is completed. At least their treatment would be better than that of ordinary people, and it's even possible that this world number 3 would be handed over to them for management. Then our arrival should be a good matter for the Eldian. They have been discriminated against, contained, and abused for hundreds of years. Now they have a chance to become an upper race again. Isn't that appealing? Was completely confused, not knowing why Ren was fighting so desperately. Must be crazy. Chapter 447, Kaido is moved. Boom boom boom, just as was inwardly complaining about whether Ren had mental issues, the missile swarm, suspected to be rocket launchers, flew like Ryu to a location about 100 meters away from the Stargate. It could be said that in the next second, they would hit the world government's fleet. Zeus! Charlotte Linland roared coldly, her large mouth splitting open. Instantly, the white cloud behind her, which had anthropomorphic features and resembled cotton, responded with a simple smile. Okay, Mama. It was seen accelerating and flying above the warship. At the same time, the color of the cloud mass quickly darkened, turning into a mass of black clouds wrapped in streaks of purple electro in the blink of an eye, facing all the incoming thunder spears. Yes, these rocket launchers were called thunder spears by the World Alliance Army. Originally, it was technology hidden by the Central Military Police of Paradise Island. Later, after Ren led people to overthrow the original Central and pushed Historia Rise to become the queen of the new Eldian Empire, this technology was put into use. This type of thunder spear was originally a small penetrating weapon launched in conjunction with the omnidirectional mobility gear, specifically used to deal with targets with hard defense like the armored Titan. Later, in order to resist the invasion of the world government, Ren released the design blueprint to Marley and the Middle East United Nations, and then gathered the best scientists from both countries to perform renovation on it. The biggest change was that the thunder spear became larger, changing from personal carrying to vehicle mounted. Its power naturally also became greater, and it changed from wired manual control and detonation to the current wireless touch-based explosion. However, this type of thunder spear in the Titan world has a faster flight speed and stronger armor-piercing ability compared to the conventional rocket launchers from M's previous life. This is related to Paradise Island's specialty product, black gold bamboo. Black gold bamboo is the main material used by Paradise Island to manufacture omnidirectional mobility gear and half-blade swords. It is a type of bamboo that absorbs underground metal elements, possessing the characteristics of toughness, lightness, and a certain degree of elasticity. Of course, due to production issues, it is definitely manufactured in the form of an alloy. I won't let you pass. The blackened Zeus sneered repeatedly. The electra surging on its body instantly burst forth with radiance, transforming into thick, long purple lightning that struck out like a spider's net. Instantly, the air in front of the medium Stargate was filled with electric flash everywhere, even momentarily suppressing the golden light above and the magma gunfire flash below. Boom 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 boom, thousands of large thunder spheres, propelled by rockets, continuously exploded within the vast area of Ryu. The surging flame and violent lightning seemed to transform into two monsters, biting and tearing at each other under countless gazes, completely mixed together. It wasn't until the World Alliance Army's 3 rounds of Thunder Spear launches were completed that the crackling and rumbling sounds gradually dissipated, accompanied by the annihilated lightning and fire. So strong, is this Big Mom? To think she can control such terrifying thunderstorms. The residents of the various islands on the Sea Star mainland once again witnessed Charlotte Linland's terrifying strength. The last time was during the live broadcast of the One Piece Great Sea Battle. It is worth mentioning that the various countries in Europa of the Demon Slayer world felt quite complex and fearful in their hearts as they watched Charlotte Linland laughing wildly on the large screen at this moment. It turns out that when this god used Prometheus to burn down a few main roads back then, she was actually holding back. Linland, hold back a bit later. With an otherworld war of this scale, I want to enjoy it for a few more days. Just as the fleet continued to advance towards the World Alliance Army's position, Kaido suddenly turned his head and instructed Linland. He was truly worried that she might directly unleash a 10-man Aegis engine later, using a super large-scale thunderstorm to wipe out everyone below. What kind of idiotic thing are you saying? Charlotte Linland pinched her still relatively slender waist with her right hand, rolled her white eyes in annoyance, and cursed. The enemy has tens of millions of military strength. Even I would need a few days. How could it be so easy to clear them all out? Kaido thought about it after hearing that and realized she was right. Tens of millions of military strength, plus those trenches, machine gun fortifications, track armored vehicles, howitzer artillery emplacements, and so on, the area to cover was vast. Our mission is to annihilate them, so to prevent them from retreating, I'll go to the rear first to block their retreat. We'll attack from both sides later. Kaido revealed a cruel smile, and the pupils in his eyes flickered with an aura full of killing intent. Mama, not bad, not bad. This suggestion is very interesting. Then I'll wait for your news here. Charlotte Linland was not someone to be trifled with either. She immediately became interested in Kaido's suggestion. To be honest, she had never killed people on a scale of tens of millions before. The two hit it off immediately. When the fleet arrived above the World Alliance Army's position, Charlotte Linland, Marco, and 9 flying warships stopped and hovered, while Kaido, taking King with him, transferred to another flying warship, and then led 10 of the flying warships to continue advancing, and at full speed. However, such a blatant act of flying directly over the battle formation naturally aroused the dissatisfaction and hostility of the World Alliance Army. Bang, damn it. These monsters from the other world are too arrogant. Shoot them down. Marshal Calvi of Marley put down the binoculars in his hand, then slammed the table fiercely, and angrily issued an order to the adjutant behind him. Yes, sir. A moment later, countless anti-aircraft guns, coordinated with the Thunder Spear armored vehicles in the rear, launched a fierce attack on the two fleets where Kaido and Linland were located. 4,367 heavy anti-aircraft guns, prototype German Flak 40 anti-aircraft gun, which had been prepared in advance and placed in different positions, had cannon barrels nearly 8 meters long and a caliber of 128 millimeters. With a shooting speed of 20 cannonballs per minute and a muzzle velocity reaching 879 meters per second, they formed a dense firepower blockade net from bottom to top, covering the 19 flying warships in the high altitude. To be honest, given the mobility and height of the flying warships, it was basically impossible for them to dodge these firepower attacks on their own. As for defense, there was no need to even think about it. After all, they were just iron plating wrapped around wood. However, naval warfare in the Sea Star world basically doesn't rely much on the ability of ships. Attack. As King and Marco loudly issued orders at almost the same time, the Air Force officers on the deck, wearing blue justice coats and already poised for action, leaped out in all directions like a heavenly maiden scattering flowers. For a time, the whistling sounds were incessant. Some drew their blades and walked in the air using moonwalk, while others transformed into some kind of flying bird or flying insect. As soon as they left the deck, they each displayed their divine abilities, using the weapons in their hands, their fists, or even their wings, to intercept the incoming anti-aircraft gun cannonballs and thunder spheres. Immortal Thistle. Marco was seen quickly transforming into a giant blue flames divine bird. With a spin of his body and a flap of his wings, he created a circular blue flames shield in front of him. No matter how the cannonballs and shells bombarded it, they simply couldn't break through. Flame Tornado. On the other fleet, King also made a bold move. In the form of a Pteranodon, he spun rapidly in the air, creating a huge flame tornado that protected the 10 flying warships to the maximum extent. Were seeing such a magnificent war confrontation scene, Kaido, as a war seeker, was instantly moved. He felt a surge of hot blood rush into his brain, and his excited emotions made his body tremble slightly. That's right, this is the Great War one want. Chapter 448, The Main Battle Force Arrives. No, I must endure. It's not time yet. On the deck, Kaido watched enviously as King led over 200 Air Force officer, competing in offense and defense against the heavy anti-aircraft gun and Thunder Spear armored vehicle below. But he still suppressed the impulse in his heart. He then picked up the wine gourd hanging from his waist, and amidst the continuous roar and rolling gun smoke in his ears, tilted his head back and took large gulps from it. Alcohol with a rich scent flowed continuously from Kaido's mouth, wetting the strong chest in front of him. And the flying warship beneath his feet slowly sailed towards the rear of the position under such fierce firepower blockade, with the Air Force officer, like Blue Falcon, escorting it. At the same time, bang, at the Stargate, large pieces of dismembered limbs and bodies and steaming white mist suddenly flew out from inside, knocking down a large number of the Wall Titan walking behind. Immediately after, an extremely violent shockwave erupted, blasting away over a dozen Wall Titan in a straight line. PFFT ha 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 ha, Whitebeard, I'm one step faster than you. Garp transformed into a white afterimage and shot out of the Stargate, then laughed like an old mischievous child at Edward Newgate who walked out behind him. This old man doesn't remember saying I would compete with you in such a boring matter. Edward Newgate replied dismissively, while his eyes surveyed the surrounding environment. He paid no attention to the rumbling that was still pushing forward not far away, then coldly snorted with a displeased expression. Humphrey, that brat Sakazuki actually messed this place up like this. This old man was thinking of admiring the scenery of the other world, but now, even the air is filled with his stench. Looking around, although the magma had not spread to the vicinity of the Stargate, it was only less than 100 meters away, so they could still feel the hot wind and sulfur scent blowing towards them. Just as his voice fell, two figures rushed out from the Stargate behind him, one after the other, and flashed past Whitebeard's left and right sides. Pa. 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 Crocodile stopped his figure, letting out his classic gasping laugh, and said mockingly to Bullet, whose expression was ashen, when it comes to speed, you're still far behind. His hockey had long since recovered to a normal level with the improvement of his spirit, so he naturally had little fear of Bullet anymore. Just when they were sprinting, the two had actually engaged in a few simple exchanges in an attempt at obstruction. Humphrey. Bullet turned his head expressionlessly, completely ignoring Crocodile. Immediately after. Sure you of the rain, Charlotte de Ifuku, Charlotte Oven, Flowers Sword Vista, Onigamo, Doberman, and a group of Army Lieutenant General, filed out from the central area of the Stargate. To the left was King Harold leading the giant unit, and to the right was Captain Guts leading the Kabaneri troops. They were all new form warrior. A blue-eerie light faintly emanated from each of their chests, and their skin was covered in various forms of hideous black armor. It is worth mentioning. Steve, Gus and Mekko were originally member of Cypher Paul. However, with the maturation of Kabaneri technology, more and more low-level soldier at Army headquarters chose to exchange military merit for injections of the new form Kabaneri enhancement serum. The scale has now exceeded 300 people. So Army headquarters applied to the Supreme Military Command and requested Steve Gus and the CP new squad he led from Cypher Paul. However, although it was called a squad, with Hazumi's departure, plus Mima Amatori being in the staff department, and Blueheart serving as Minister Tsuru's personal guard, it had long existed in name only. From then on, Steve Gus became the Kabaneri unit commander of Army headquarters, granted the Major General rank, while Mekko was his adjutant, granted the Colonel rank. New form Kabaneri can be completely called multifunctional special forces soldier. They can engage in melee combat, move flexibly, and even act as humanoid turret, ready to execute demolition bombing mission using fierce psychic energy bullet. They indeed have greater value for the army. From then on, the world government's main battle force had all arrived in the Titan world. The 200-meter wide Stargate had much stronger passage efficiency than the previous small Stargate. Unfortunately, there is only one upgrade authority every 3 years. In contrast, the rumbling was still pushing forward from all directions in an endless long line. They seemed infinite and continuous, completely surrounding the Stargate. It was completely a surrounding Stargate scene. Although Kuzan was trying his best to keep the sea surface frozen, this peninsula is surrounded by the sea on 3 sides and is incredibly large. The key is that the world government here did not get a map of the Titan world, so they do not understand where exactly this place is located, or where Paradis Island is. After all, most of the Wall Titan must have come from Paradis Island. But now, because Ren had carefully adjusted the number of Wall Titan in each direction, it is temporarily difficult to see the difference in quantity. They can only wait until the wall titan in other areas are depleted before determining the location of Paradis Island and wiping them out in one go. But here comes the problem. Ren started preparing several years in advance. Who knows how many wall titan he has hidden in the seabed? After all, these things are made from sand, and there's no mention of them having a shelf life. They stayed inside the walls for hundreds of years before. As for the number, it is said to be tens of millions, but theoretically, Mir in the coordinate space can create them infinitely. Unless the sand inside runs out someday. There is also one biggest problem. That is, Kong, Sengoku, Ryman, and others in the command department believe that the environment of the peninsula where the Stargate is located should not be overly damaged, at least ensuring conditions for basic human life. This is also why Sakazuki did not directly activate his awakening and only turned a part of the area behind into a magma lake. Otherwise, if he directly created an active volcano that erupts forever, no matter how many wall titan came, they would never return. That would truly be infinite versus infinite. We must leave some human here to guard and prevent these great giant from approaching the Stargate. Garp, seeing the rumbling getting closer, no longer wore a playful expression and said solemnly to Edward Newgate beside him. You want to stay, you stay. This old man is full of anger right now and needs to vent it on a human of this world, especially that other world brat named Ren. After Edward Newgate finished speaking, he kicked off the lowest sandy land beneath him, flying out like a nearly 7-meter-tall nuclear missile with a roar. Immediately, a surging air current was unleashed, causing Garp's and the surrounding humans' coat of justice to flap loudly in the wind. Ever since he learned moonwalk, he has been very fond of this wild way of moving. Whitebeard this bastard. Garp was speechless, a string of black line appearing on his head. He actually encountered someone even more unreasonable than himself. But he immediately turned his head and gave order to Bullet and Crocodile behind him. You two stay here and build a defense line. If another giant gets close to the Stargate, just wait for this old man's fist. After speaking, he also burst out, transforming into a white cannonball and shooting away, only leaving behind the two with ashen expression. Humphrey, I don't remember a Marines admiral having the authority to order an army lieutenant general? Crocodile sneered with dissatisfaction. Do you think that old bastard will reason with us? Bullet gritted his teeth and clenched his massive fists, glaring fiercely at Garp's departing back. He had actually engaged in challenges with the other party twice before, but the result was self-evident: he was beaten badly. Crocodile was speechless and fell silent with a gloomy expression. Chapter 449, The Fear Dominated by Giants. About 10 kilometers southwest of the Stargate. Rows of thick, long barbed wire could be seen crisscrossing the dry land. Looking down from high altitude, the dry, yellow earth seemed to have suffered countless lashings, leaving behind these terrifying and ugly, hideous scars. Behind this dangerous zone, the first trench appeared, its endless tail end completely out of sight. They were mainly divided into the forward firepower trench and a support trench behind it, as well as zigzagging communication trenches connecting these two main trenches. 40 to 50,000 army military strength were stationed within them. Around these trenches, one could also see bunker buildings resembling little giants. The World Alliance Army, having had several years of ample preparation time. Therefore, they directly cast these semi-permanent machine gun bunkers, sniper posts, observation posts, and other defensive works with concrete and stone bricks, basically one every 50 meters. On the left and right sides of the communication trenches, two armored trains slowly moved along the railway below, like giant snakes patrolling their territory. Each armored train was divided into 5 steel train cars, with an anti-Titan cannon of 105 mm caliber and 2 Maxim heavy machine guns mounted on top of each car. These collectively formed a defense line. Its length reached several hundred kilometers, perfectly isolating and separating the Buruk Peninsula area, the Bari, Tanag, Seoul, and Nugale provinces of Somalia. And there was a similar defense line every kilometer, totaling 12 defense lines, accommodating nearly 10 million military strength, thousands of machine gun bunkers, and over 20 various artillery emplacements. Behind these defense lines was an even larger logistics area. Large numbers of houses, small buildings, plazas, paths, and airports prepared for airships and aircraft units. This was the battlefield built with nearly 80% of the Titan world's military power and vast amounts of resources, manpower, and construction. They were fully prepared for a comprehensive war of resistance. Blake, have you noticed that the sound coming from the front is getting louder and louder? Somewhere in the firepower trench of the second defense line. A young man wearing a silver-gray steel helmet, with many small pockmarks on his face and yellowish-brown hair, while clutching the Mosin Nogan rifle in his arms, carefully whispered to his partner beside him with his brown pupils. In his ears, the continuous roar of explosions and the rapid machine gun fire came not only from the front but also from directly above their heads. However, he was just a small soldier in the army and didn't need to worry about the matters in the sky for the time being. It should be that the firepower trench in front has been captured. Now our people have retreated to the support trench. The black-haired young man called Blake leaned against the earth wall of the trench with his eyes closed, casually responding to Arnold, then added, "Before it's our turn, you should hurry up and get some rest. Cherish this little remaining piece." Arnold, however, pursed his lips and asked again, "Do you think we can defeat these other-world invaders? Whether we can win or not, I don't know. But I know that regardless of winning or losing, we two are definitely going to die. However, I already slept with Melissa before I came here, so I have no regrets." Blake still didn't open his eyes, because in the darkness of the world, he could more clearly imagine that beautiful, fair, and gentle smile. Ever since he was assigned to this second defense line, he had realized that he was bound to die. "Ah, you actually?" Arnold looked at his friend in astonishment. Soon, his gaze was filled with envy and disappointment, because he also liked Melissa. "That's not right. Melissa couldn't possibly like you. She always said she wanted to marry a rich man, you." "Yeah, she doesn't like me, but that doesn't stop me from having her body before coming here. Anyway, I'm not going back, so why shouldn't I have some fun?" Blake suddenly opened his eyes and calmly looked at the 9 small black dots in the blue sky. He knew those were airships from the other world. Although they weren't airships, they could float in the air, which was very incredible. When they first arrived, they were attacked by countless anti-aircraft guns, and then many blue afterimages and yellowish-green flames appeared, blocking all the attacks. However, they didn't seem to have any intention of counterattacking and directly increased their height. After reaching a position that anti-aircraft guns couldn't reach, they stopped there motionless, as if waiting for something. "What? Blake, how could you do that?" Upon hearing this, Arnold suddenly stood up, glaring at Blake in anger, completely ignoring the surprised gazes of others, and loudly accused. "You are committing a crime. And the person you hurt is Melissa. She didn't offend you." "Crime?" Blake sneered and said. "Now I am on the battlefield, and next, I will fight against the invaders from the other world for everyone. So, no matter what crime it is, it should be offset. You." Arnold was furious and was about to reach out and grab Blake's coat collar. Roar, but at this moment, a violent explosion occurred outside the trench. The deafening loud noise and the surging air current pushed him, who was caught off guard, to the ground. Roar. 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 In an instant, more cannonballs fell from the air onto the area covered with barbed wire, and clusters of gunfire flash rose into the sky. "They are clearing the minefield." Blake's expression was ashen. He stared intently at the 9 black dots above his head, only to find that they were descending while continuously firing cannons outwards. It turned out that a large number of landmines were buried underground beneath the barbed wire, and when their side needed to pass through, they used railways and armor trains to transport supplies and troops. It seems the enemy suffered losses at the first defense line. Indeed, this bad boy named Blake guessed correctly. At the first defense line in the front, the army of the world government did have more than a dozen Kabinari warriors who died on landmines, and even a few giant warriors suffered some injuries. That kind of chain explosion that suddenly occurred from under their feet was too late to guard against. The key was that the people of the Sea Star world basically had no concept of this minefield tactics, so they only saw the barbed wire blocking the paths. As a transmigrator, naturally knew something about it. But he really didn't think of this matter and didn't remind the people in the command department beforehand to pay attention to landmines or anything. However, even if he had noticed, Im probably wouldn't have interfered. After all, it was best for the people below to accumulate this kind of war experience little by little, even if it meant paying a certain sacrifice as tuition. See? Now that they had learned a lesson, Minister Khan of the command department directly ordered Marco to command the 9 flying warships he led to bomb the minefield of the second defense line. As for Charlotte Linlin, she was an honorary admiral and actually had no real command authority. Half an hour later, the cannon fire ceased, the explosions subsided, and the area outside the trench was a mess. But the next second, screams and exclamations rose one after another from various parts of the trench. Arnold, trembling, pressed himself against the earth wall, looking in terror at the other end, where terrifying figures appeared in the spreading gun smoke. GI giants. They were giant warriors about 20 meters tall. They wore black armor covered with blood-red patterns on the surface, held giant cold weapons made of the same material as their armor, and their black coats swayed continuously in the wind. A fierce aura mixed with strong killing intent, as they continuously stepped closer, turned into a surging wind of fear that swept through the hearts of all the soldiers in the trench. Giants, it seemed, were a fear passed down through generations in the bloodline of most people in this world. At this moment, they once again experienced the feeling of their ancestors being dominated by giants, except this time, the giants were from another world. Chapter 450, Who Can a Hand Grenade Kill? Tat 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 tat, bright gunfire flash erupted from the firing port of every bunker. Bullets were fired wildly at an extremely high frequency, turning into afterimages in midair, forming a large, dense firepower net covering the continuously approaching other-world giants. Behind them, at their feet, and on their shoulders, there were also humanoid monsters completely covered in hideous black armor, with their chests and eyes emitting a faint blue light. The entire defense line was already unleashing full firepower. Inside the trench, Blake and Arnold also couldn't bother arguing, continuously pulling the trigger along with their comrades on both sides, but the result was despair. Bastard, how can this be? They can't be hit at all. Arnold cursed furiously through gritted teeth. He was very confident in his marksmanship. Just now, several bullets had clearly hit their target precisely, but they were either blocked by the armor of those other-world giants, or by those humanoid monsters emitting blue light, who intercepted them with arms that had turned into pitch-black blades. Something like sword-slashing bullets actually happened right before their eyes. But cursing aside, his hand movements didn't stop. After noticing that the rifle was useless, he directly took an M24 stick grenade from his waist and placed it beside him, then continued to pull the trigger, contributing some insignificant bullets to their firepower net. On the other side, after approaching a certain distance with the giant unit, the Kubanrai warriors all stopped, and then raised their right-hand palms covered in barbed black armor. Following a buzzing sound, a mass of purplish-blue energy was seen beginning to gather in front of their palms, and just as it was about to become spherical, it transformed into a surging energy shockwave and shot out. Boom. 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 The purplish-blue mental energy blasted beams of light, dozens of meters wide and penetrating hundreds of meters, onto the World Alliance Army's defense line. Soldiers, armored trains, and even machine gun bunkers along the way were instantly reduced to nothing. Seizing this opportunity, the giant units from the Elbaf Kingdom also launched a full charge. Among them, a giant vice admiral who once belonged to the Marine headquarters, directly stomped the ground, causing it to explode, accompanied by bursts of sonic booms, used moonwalk to fly into the air, and then smashed heavily into the trench zone from above like a meteorite, instantly sending all nearby Alliance Army soldiers flying. Kill a giant vice admiral glared with terrifying eyes, fiercely swung the huge battle axe in his hand towards the trench on the left. In an instant, the soldiers inside turned into blood mist and flesh and blood. More and more giant warriors, enduring the sky-filled bullet rain and cannon fire, charged into the defense line zone, creating one bloody storm after another. Screaming cry and despairing wail became the main theme of the battlefield. However, compared to the giants of this world, these giants from the world had no interest in eating people, so the sight was slightly easier to bear. Similarly, the Kubanrai warriors also displayed their slaughter talent in melee combat. Their observation hockey and agile dexterity ensured that amidst the sky-filled bullet rain, and even the bombardment from anti-tank guns, they could dodge and weave with ease. The biological black armor on their bodies could effectively defend against rifle attacks. Even if some bullets hit their bodies, at most, they would only cause a few sparks to fly. And once they charged into the crowd of soldiers, their arms transformed into black blades could unleash the most brutal slaughter. If any stragglers attempted to escape, they would also be forcibly pulled back by the black sticky thread shot out from various parts of their bodies, and then killed with a single blade strike. This scene. It was like a group of ordinary troops still in the World War II era, being subjected to a large-scale attack by some advanced alien civilization. However, with a military strength of 400,000 to 500,000 people, it was not an easy matter to completely defeat them. Kill. Let's fight these otherworld dog bastard to the death. We can't retreat. Even if we die, we have to take one with us. Our family is behind us. In the trench, soldiers from Marley, the Middle East Alliance, the Eastern Haizaru Nation, and over 100 other countries were seen. They had already fixed bayonets onto the front of their rifles, then screamed themselves hoarse, roaring madly, launching a desperate charge towards the giant warriors and Kubanrai warriors. There were also some soldiers who were gripping M24 stick grenades tightly in their hands. They were attempting to use their own flesh and blood to buy more firing time for the bunkers and armor trains behind them. It was clear that these soldiers truly regarded the world government as evil invaders who intended to massacre or slavery their world. Therefore, these hot-blooded men, in order to protect their world and their family, were willing to sacrifice their own lives. Although what they thought wasn't entirely wrong, the world government was indeed an invader and a conqueror, and was currently indeed going to slaughter their entire World Alliance army. Afterwards, they would most likely slavery the entire world. But the problem was that slaughter and slavery were clearly avoidable. However, now, it was too late for everything. From the moment the world government lost an army general, this world was bound to experience a long period of suffering and torment. At this moment, on the second defense line, there were gunshots, shell craters, and corpse everywhere. Thick gun smoke mixed with the smell of blood, spread out under the effect of the blast wave. Somewhere, a scarlet blade light flashed. Over a dozen soldiers who were in the middle of a charge, the anger and ferocity on their faces froze. Gradually, a red line first appeared around their necks, followed by the line's opening growing wider and wider, and the head above slid down to the ground along the cut. The people of this world are also so weak. Shiryu, holding a cigar in his mouth, stood with his back to the decapitated corpse. In his heart, he began to feel that killing people wasn't that interesting anymore. He had previously thought that killing was his lifelong hobby. But ever since he slaughtered the Indonesian monkeys in a few cities in the Demon Slayer world, he felt that killing these other worlders was simply too boring. It was even more boring than mowing grass. He originally thought this third otherworld would be a bit interesting, but unexpectedly, it was still so fragile and vulnerable. Are all otherworlders this trash? Just as Shiryu was standing somewhat dazed on the battlefield where bullets and cannon fire flew everywhere, suddenly, a young man rushed over, while pointing a sharp bayonet at the former, and at the same time, continuously shouted something from his mouth. His expression appeared extremely angry. This attracted Shiryu's attention. He calmly glanced at the other party. Why? Tell me, why are you invading here? Why are you killing so many people? Blake roared in a hoarse voice, trembling all over as he glared furiously at the nearly 3-meter-tall little giant before him. He was very afraid and knew he would die soon, but he still wanted to question these otherworlders. You are also human, right? Right. Can you please get out of our world? Arnold, not far away, also discovered Blake's foolish behavior, and cursed loudly. Is this idiot in such a hurry to die? But cursing aside, he still gripped his gun and rushed over immediately, while also taking the last remaining hand grenade from his waist. Although he really didn't want to admit it, the other party was indeed his only friend. So noisy, what kind of bird language are you jabbering? After Shiryu heard a few sentences, he found that he couldn't understand at all. This made him impatient. With a movement of Ryu in his hand, he sliced off Blake's head. Blake's head, suspended in midair, showed an expression of unwillingness and hatred, but immediately his gaze was filled with shock, because he saw that Guy Arnold had actually rushed over, gripping a smoking hand grenade. Ah, let's die together, otherworld monster. Boom, Arnold's body was swallowed by gunfire flash and thick smoke, also engulfing Shiryu. But just as Blake's head, which had fallen to the ground, was about to lose consciousness, he despairingly saw Shiryu walk out of the black smoke completely unharmed. Shiryu glanced disdainfully at their corpse, and said with a curl of his lip, who could a toy like a hand grenade kill? Chapter 451, The Troublesome Nature of the Rumbling. C-Star World, located in Area RL 1500 of the Red Line. This is the location of the headquarters of the world government's Supreme Military Command, and also the main office location for the subordinate Command Department, Staff Department, and Military and Political Department. At this moment, in the meeting room of the Command Department, a virtual imaging holographic projection formed by the projections of 3 visual Dendenmushi created a high-definition, 3-dimensional sandbox model on a meeting table. These were the real-time battlefield maps of World Number 3, located on the other side of the Stargate. Minister Kong, Minister Tsuru, Minister Zephyr, Marshal Raymond, and Fleet Admiral Sengoku stood around the table. Their expressions varied as they overlooked the situation across the entire peninsula. Starting from the location of the medium Stargate, it was clearly visible that Douglas Barrett and Sir Crocodile were each leading army officer like Charlotte Oven and Charlotte Cracker, who possessed large-scale area-clearing abilities, to block the rumbling armies coming from the northern and southern parts of the peninsula. Behind the Stargate, which was the eastern part of the peninsula, had already become a terrifying magma lake, and the sea surface further away was completely frozen, with heavy battleship frozen solid standing on the ice surface. Meanwhile, Shiryu, Charlotte Daifuku, Flower Sword Vista, Onigamo, Doberman, and Blumenko were quickly following the giant unit and Kabanari troops, participating in the assault on the World Alliance Army's defense line. In the air, Kizaru was still transformed into a golden flash, blocking countless howitzer above the Stargate. Aokiji, on the other hand, had transformed into a repairman of the sea, riding an ice storm pheasant in the vast sea area near the peninsula, finding the landing points of the Wall Titan one by one and freezing them. At the same time, taking advantage by this opportunity, the Black Army unit poured out continuously from the 200-meter-wide Stargate like a massive black torrent. Thump, 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 the sound of their goose stepping, the uniform footfalls, and the invincible aura, the absolute confidence in their own strength, almost materialized and permeated the surrounding air, making the atmosphere in the court exceptionally solemn and solemn. As soon as the leading army unit arrived on the land of the other world, they advanced towards the west of the peninsula without any hesitation, because that's where the gunshot was most frequent and the artillery fire was densest. And there, Edward Newgate and Garp had already pulled a significant distance away from the giant unit and others on the second defense line, taking the lead in breaking into the northern and southern ends of the World Alliance Army's third defense line, each fighting against 400,000 to 500,000 military strength alone. The terrifying tremor power, along with the air, crushed everything blocking their path: machine gun bunker, armored train, and all the incoming bullet rain, cannonball, and thunder sphere. As for the weak ordinary soldiers, they were like ant facing a gale, not even having the qualification to approach within 100 meters of the two of them. And that wasn't all. In the central zone of the entire defense line, which was the fifth defense line, it was being mercilessly ravaged from the air. The sea of fire unleashed by Prometheus, the lightning storm struck down by Zeus, and various high-explosive cannonballs specifically used for the maximum power of a buster call, accompanied by Charlotte Linland's unrestrained laughter, swallowed up swathes of trench and lives in an overwhelming manner. Even though there were a large number of anti-aircraft gun below returning fire, they simply couldn't break through the escort line jointly established by Marco and over 100 Air Force officer. The worst was the logistics area at the very end of the defense line, beyond the 12th defense line. It was currently being bombed and slaughtered by 10 flying warships led by Air Force Admiral Green Dragon Kaido and Air Force Vice Admiral Flame Disaster King. They completely disregarded the fact that most of the residents here were logistics personnel, family member, or medical personnel. Terrifying burrow breath sprayed from the mouth of the giant green dragon, directly piercing through the building area comparable to a large city. It carved a hideous line of fire on the ground below, and everything affected was melted by the high temperature. King was doing the same, showcasing the Lunarian race's fire control ability to the fullest. Wherever he went, it would surely stir up natural disaster like flame tornado. It could be said that they completed the Air Force's bombing mission perfectly. Just as the 100 or so Air Force officer wearing blue justice coat on the flying warship were somewhat bored watching Kaido and King demonstrate how to set fires. A whistling sound came from the horizon in the distance, causing them to turn their heads in unison, and then they were pleasantly surprised to find that a large number of biplane fighter and battle airship were flying towards them. Looking at their numbers, there were probably around 1,000 of them. Ha 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 ha, finally something to do. Just watching Green Dragon Admiral display his might, my hands have been itching for a while. Indeed, if I wasn't afraid of being affected by their attacks, I would have gone down to slash people long ago. These Air Force officers chatted and laughed non-stop, but no one dared to fly out on their own to meet the approaching airplane and airship. It wasn't until the majestic green dragon in the air turned his head and laughed whirro at them, giving the order, "You brats, what are you waiting for? Smash them." Clearly, Kaido couldn't shed his pirate habits in a short time, but no one cared about that. Yes. On the deck of the 10 flying warship, the Air Force officer roared their acceptance of the order, and one after another, they flew out at high speed using their respective means, engaging in a chaotic battle with a biplane and airship that were firing at them. However, an accident suddenly occurred. Just as 2 Air Force officer, one using moonwalk and the other transformed into magpie form, were about to tear open the gas bag of a battle airship, with a loud noise, it exploded on its own. The fierce gunfire flash that expanded at an extremely fast speed instantly swallowed them, and moments later, they turned into 2 burning torches falling towards the ground below. This scene startled the surrounding Air Force officer. But more people had already approached those battle airship, and sure enough, they began to explode one after another, like bright giant fireball appearing in the sky. Soon, everyone reacted. These battle airship were performing suicide bombing, just to take down a portion of them. Clearly, facing the power of another civilization's invasion, every world would not lack warrior who dared to sacrifice themselves. Tragic. However, the 5 big shot in the command department meeting room didn't pay too much attention to the matter on these front lines. They simply didn't know what there was to worry about. At most, there would be some low-level casualties, which were not worth mentioning. The problem now is how to stop the rumbling. If it's truly tens of millions of 60-meter giant pushing forward almost endlessly, this is no small trouble. Minister Tsuru frowned as she looked at the virtual sandbox model and said in a deep voice, "We cannot let the Stargate be constantly threatened by invasion. We must resolve this so-called rumbling. According to the intelligence given to us by the 5 elders, the rumbling is said to be tens of millions, but it's very likely infinite. As long as that year keeps creating them in the coordinate space, and as long as that Ren keeps the rumbling activated, then they will truly be endless." Minister Kong also realized the troublesome nature of the matter. Even if they killed all the tens of millions of the World Alliance army, these wall titan would still continuously pour in. They couldn't possibly leave Barrett and the others there indefinitely to eliminate these mindless chunks of meat that would never disappear, could they? At this point, Fleet Admiral Sengoku asked. The intelligence says that every Titan shifter host can only live for 13 years after inheriting the power of the Titans. How much time does he have left now? Zephyr understood his meaning and frowned, saying, I think we should find that Ren as soon as possible, but the problem is we don't know where he is or what he looks like. He also has the future sight ability, and finally, there's the language and writing barriers. It's even difficult to catch an informant to ask. Chapter 452, The Candidate for the Glint Fruit. Regarding the issue of stopping the rumbling, Im was also deep in thought, especially since he had a deeper understanding of the Titan world. But precisely because of this, he also knew how troublesome the matter was. To think about this matter, he didn't even have the interest to see the four sisters of the Yashiki family after they were brought to Noah's Arkansas. He merely had Stussy arrange for people to train and educate them in maid duties. Because Im felt that this game of wits with Ren, separated by a stargate, was more interesting. Let me think, from that kid Ren's perspective, he must have known long ago that those armies couldn't stop the world government's invasion, and he also knew that the strength of the Titan shifters wouldn't be a match for Garp and the others. So the best option is to leave beforehand, then hide with all his trusted partners. Why hide? Because as long as he is alive, the rumbling will not stop. Even if Paradis Island is destroyed, he can still transform into the final tail giant, Ren's founder Titan form in the manga, and summon a large number of wall titans to form a new round of the rumbling. In other words, even if the world government defeats the World Alliance army and conquers the Titan world, as long as Ren doesn't die, he and the other Titan shifter hosts will always be a huge trouble. A group of terrorists who can nuke a city at any time and summon countless wall titans to trample everything at any time. So how do we find them? This is the main point Im was thinking about, and it was also the problem that Sengoku, Tsuru, and the others on the other side were struggling with. You must know. In the Titan world, there are not only battle airships but also things like biplane bombers. Their mobility is already particularly troublesome. Coupled with his absurd simulator-level future sight ability, he can completely achieve 100% evasion from anyone's arrest. Unless real-time monitoring and position locking of Ren can be achieved from beyond visual range. But now, we don't even know which direction he's in. Im sorted out his thoughts. First, we need to figure out the current time point in the Titan world, and then deduce Ren's age from that, so we can roughly know how long the rumbling can last at most. Second, we need to lock onto Ren's direction, and preferably figure out his position as well. Finally, dispatch people with high-speed mobility to pursue and arrest. Then, the problem circled back. To know the time point in the Titan world, they needed to find a native of the Titan world to understand, but there was no common language or writing. Language and writing, there was actually a way to solve them. That was to find scholars specializing in language to translate the three mainstream languages of the Titan world, Marlian, Middle Eastern, and Eldian. But that would take too long. So, since conventional means wouldn't work, they could only think of unconventional means, such as devil fruit abilities. While recalling relevant information from the canon, Im ordered Stussy to bring the latest devil fruit encyclopedia and a devil fruit record book from the Holy Land Treasury. Then he quickly flipped through these two large books of different thicknesses. Soon, he found the most suitable devil fruit. The Parimsha System Language Fruit Ability User. The basic abilities allow the ability user to understand the effective speech of any creature and also allow their own words to be understood by any creature. The most powerful part is its awakening, which allows the language spoken by the ability user to be realized to a certain extent. What does that mean? For example, if this ability user says sword, come. A sword will definitely appear out of thin air, or if they shout firewall, a wall formed by flame will also appear. Although it is said that these things are only temporary, this ability can be quite powerful if used well. Then, in the Devil Fruit Record book, Im tried to find this language fruit, but as expected, he didn't find it. Well, how could things go so smoothly? There was no other way but to keep searching. He then found similar ones in the Devil Fruit Encyclopedia, such as the Parimsha System Text Fruit, and the Subordinate Language Fruit, the Parimsha System Listen Fruit. But these were not in the record book. However, you wouldn't know if you didn't look, but once you looked, you were shocked. There were so many devil fruits. Just those recorded numbered over 50,000. And the existing devil fruits in the Holy Land Treasury reached over 10,000, among which only about 6,000 could be matched in the encyclopedia. This meant that the remaining 4,000 or so devil fruits had completely unknown abilities. And the language fruit, text fruit,
And listen fruit belonged to the type that were recorded in the encyclopedia but not in the treasury. So, it was quite frustrating. Listen fruit? Im's clear gaze flickered a few times, because based on this fruit, he thought of another devil fruit, the Parimsha system glint fruit. I remember the glint fruit has the ability to see through others' inner thoughts, and it also has a super long-range ability, granting a vision radius of 4,000 kilometers. Isn't this exactly what's needed now? What is the concept of 4,000 kilometers? The diameter of the north-south territory of that great country in his previous life was about 5,500 kilometers, and the east-west distance was about 5,200 kilometers. Immediately, Im picked up the transponder snail again and gave an order to Stussy outside, telling her to bring the data on Viola, the second princess of the Dressrosa kingdom. I remember she ate the glint fruit ability when she was about 10 years old. She should be about right now, shouldn't she? He was just a little worried that the still young Viola might not be able to reach the level she would 24 years later due to insufficient training and development of her fruit ability. Not long after, Stussy arrived with the data. She had a graceful figure and wore a black dress with black threads. No way, is Viola only 5 years old, and she's not even a glint fruit ability user? Im frowned upon seeing this. After he finished reading all the content, his mood improved slightly, because it stated that the Parimsha system glint fruit was in the treasury of the Riku royal family. It must be said that Cypher Pal is quite effective in monitoring the royalty of various kingdoms, they even know what's in their treasuries. So, who should the glint fruit be given to? This was a devil fruit many times more powerful than the Byakugan, and it would definitely be useful in many places in the future. Therefore, the candidate needed to be chosen carefully. It would be best if the person could be put to use immediately after eating it. After all, Ren needed to be found urgently. Right. The person themselves must also have a certain level of strength, so they can be directly sent to arrest Ren and his group. With sufficient strength, there's no need to worry about them being easily killed. Otherwise, if the ability user dies, it would be difficult to find the glint fruit again. Someone strong, fast, and suitable for the glint fruit. Im sat deep in thought on the empty throne. The Kuja guards below silently stood guard on both sides of the main hall, like Valkyries clad in silver armor and wielding silver bows. The silver arrows in the quivers at their waists gleamed with scarlet pattern sheen. And Stussy stood on the red carpet, quietly waiting for the order. At this moment, Im suddenly looked up and thought to himself, perhaps that person could work, but his personality has some issues. But no matter what, let's bring him back first. Immediately, he said coldly to Stussy. Send an order to the 5 elders. Have them immediately send people to find Baroque Redfield's whereabouts, an approximate range is fine. Chapter 453, Escape and Pursuit. Baroque Redfield. Legend says he was once a nobility of a certain kingdom. Coupled with his fondness for wearing red clothing, he was initially known as the Red Earl on the Grand Line. Later, people noticed that despite his extremely strong combat power, he neither formed a pirate crew or any other influence, nor did he even have a single attendant by his side. He always traveled alone wherever he went. No matter who his opponent was, no matter how many people they had, he always engaged in one-on-one combat, and could still come and go freely, acting incredibly carefree. At this point, everyone realized this was a top expert who was incredibly aloof in personality and had reached the realm of a great swordsman. Therefore, they gave him an even more imposing epithet. Solitary Red. His bounty was as high as 3.055 billion Bailey. Im truly hadn't paid attention to this person before. The truth was, Redfield's presence was very low, he basically didn't cause much trouble, so the world government and marine headquarters hadn't paid him much attention. Now needing a powerhouse who was strong enough, fast enough, and also a non-ability user, Im thought of him. He was a top-tier combat power after all. Regardless, it was better to attempt recruitment first. Otherwise, leaving such a figure unused in the wild was truly a shameful waste. As for his personality, Im felt he didn't need to change anything, as long as he was willing to follow orders. Besides, didn't Cypher Pal have Brook? Brook's relationship with Redfield was similar to Luffy's future relationship with Shanks. Having him act as a lobbyist was likely a sure thing. In the Titan world, a large biplane was flying steadily under the blue sky, quickly passing by one white cloud after another. We'll be arriving at the exchange dock soon. After you return, you must remind Queen Historia again not to resist the orders of those otherworlders. You have already seen the reason with your own eyes. Ren, dressed in black clothes and black pants, swept his calm gaze across the faces of Mikasa, Levi, and the others. So you've been lying to us all this time. Levi narrowed his eyes, a dangerous look flowing within them. Yes, what I said before about them being unable to resist the rumbling was a lie. The truth is, they are too strong. No matter what We are not their opponents. We will ultimately be defeated, we will be subjected to slavery, and I will also die. At this moment, Ren no longer concealed these matters. But as soon as his last word was spoken, Levi grabbed him by the neck, and with a bang, slammed him heavily against the surface of the cabin behind him. Levi. Mikasa and the others' expressions changed drastically, but Levi completely ignored their pleas. He stared coldly into Ren's eyes and asked in a low voice. What's the reason? Since the outcome cannot be changed, since our world will ultimately be enslaved, why not fight back? However, Ren's words aroused the dissatisfaction of another new Eldian Empire Central officer. He angrily questioned loudly. Do you know how many people will die? There are tens of millions of troops from various countries there. I am giving them a chance to die for freedom. Ren looked at Levi in front of him without turning his head, his tone still completely devoid of emotion. At least that's better than being enslaved without resistance, being slaughtered defenseless, and watching helplessly as friends and family are abused to death without being able to do anything, right? After listening, Levi slowly released the palm that was gripping his neck. Then he asked. Then why do you want us to give up resisting? Because we are Eldians. If possible, I hope you can survive as much as possible. As for the contribution to this world, I can pay that alone. Everyone understood Ren's meaning, which caused the atmosphere in the cabin to fall into silence. Ren felt that his power of the 9 Titans and the rumbling were sufficient as the help and strength provided by the new Eldian Empire in this world alliance, and that no other Eldians were needed to participate in the war and sacrifice. What are you going to do next? Mikasa asked at this moment. Go to the other end of this planet and live. Ren looked out at the white clouds through the small round window. As long as I don't die, the rumbling will not stop. Unfortunately, I only have less than a year of lifespan left. Because he possessed the ability of future sight, he had already made all possible preparations, such as preparing connecting airplanes in various countries along the way. Next, he would be living in the sky for a long time. Ren, I want to go with you. Mikasa said firmly without hesitation, her gaze so resolute. Ren was not surprised by this either, and smiled. Okay, I also hope to be with you during this last time. Are you sure those other worlders won't exterminate us? Just as the biplane began to descend in height, Levi asked his last question. Yes, I'm sure. In the future vision I saw, Eldians were mining ice-burst stone, planting black gold bamboo. There was no freedom, not even a hint of a smile, but at least most people were alive. Ren said softly, his gaze dim. Levi, if possible, take the queen and leave Paradis Island as soon as possible. Find the deep mountains and old forests to live in seclusion. Perhaps that way you can live a more comfortable life. He was also in despair. The world government was too strong, too strong. He had seen many futures, but none could prevent the result of being conquered and enslaved. 20 minutes later, the biplane was refueled and took off again from the exchange port. Next, it would carry Ren and Mikasa to South America on the other side of the Earth. Because that was the farthest place from Marley. The Peninsula War on the Medium Stargate side was still ongoing. Although the World Alliance army was being steadily defeated, it was still a scale of tens of millions, so it would take some time to be completely crushed. The key was the world government's attitude. They gave the World Alliance army no hope of surrendering whatsoever. The front, middle, and rear sections were completely blocked, clearly showing an attitude of wanting to kill them all. Naturally, this also provoked everyone into a bloodthirsty frenzy. From top to bottom, they had long since made the resolve to fight to the death. Besides, they still had the rumbling. If they persisted, these damned otherworlder monsters would eventually be trampled into mud by countless giants. Meanwhile, in the command department meeting room within the Marine Star headquarters, Sengoku, Tsuru, Zephyr, and others were still thinking about how to arrest Ren, but the numerous difficulties before them were truly headache-inducing. Just then, the transponder snail on the table rang. Minister Kong picked up the handset. After listening for a moment, he showed a surprised expression. After ending the call, he looked at the other 4 with a strange expression. The 5 elders have already formulated the operation plan to arrest Ren Yeager. The executor of the mission is currently on their way, and they require us to prepare an airplane for the pursuit. What? What plan? Who is the executor? Sengoku, Tsuru, Ryman, Zephyr, and the others all spoke up, their faces also showing various expressions of surprise. Baroque Redfield. Chapter 454, The Pursuit Team for Ren. This Redfield is really arrogant, actually looking down on the glint fruit. On the moon, Im sat on the empty throne, speechless, looking at Stussy who had just reported the situation below. Because he personally gave the order. Saint Shepherd Jupiter naturally attached great importance to it, directly influencing Cypher Paul to utilize their intelligence capability to the extreme, quickly scouting out the opponent's approximate range of activity. Then M used the Star Fate function to quickly lock onto his position, and then had Cypher Paul dispatch special personnel to make contact. Thanks to the White Dragon already mastered by the world government, and the existence of flying warships, Cypher Paul's operation efficiency was several times faster than before. Just like that, Brooke and Lucci finally met the Red of Solitude. The content of the communication between Brooke and Redfield during this period was not worth mentioning, it was just reminiscing about the past. The key point was inviting him to join the world government and use the ability of the Parimsha system Glint Fruit to help the world government arrest the #1 most wanted criminal of the Third Otherworld, Ren Yeager. First, regarding joining, Redfield did not show particular resistance. Regarding the matters of the Stargate and other worlds, not many people on the world are unaware now, and the temptation of the multiverse is also enough to attract him. It's just that because he is used to being alone, he proposed not to be assigned to a specific department, hoping to only accept the honorary admiral rank from the command department, like Whitebeard and Big Mom. Regarding this request, after M received the report, he considered it for a moment and then agreed. As the saying goes, get him on the ship first, and see what happens later. Once he experiences the benefits of the system, it will be easier to discuss. Finally, the problem arose with this Glint fruit. After Redfield heard about its approximate ability, he refused it without hesitation, even claiming that this Glint fruit was not worthy of him, and that he would absolutely not eat any devil fruit. What should we do now? Who should the Glint fruit be given to? M's brain began to rapidly turn. First, one thing had to be confirmed, the ability of this devil fruit was very important and definitely couldn't be given to some nameless extras. After all, they are completely unknown, and furthermore, developing a devil fruit actually requires a certain amount of talent and ability. If it's given to a mediocre person, it would be a real waste. Secondly, the person who eats the Glint fruit ability must also participate in the mission to arrest Ren Yeager, so they must have at least a certain level of combat power. Otherwise, if they die during the process, it will be even more troublesome. Let me think, the Glint fruit's ability primarily lies in far sight, X-ray vision, mind reading, and the iron tears of its awakening. M rested his arm on the throne, placing his palm against his chin, his gaze slightly lost, as if in a daze. But this posture, combined with his presence, gave off a feeling of aloofness, looking down on everything. Among these, the awakening energy seems to be the most useless. Turning flowing tears into high-temperature molten iron seems to have considerable power, but this ability is practically a joke to an expert. No wonder Redfield looked down on it. As for his talk about absolutely not eating devil fruits, it's an even more comical remarks that only he, a transmigrator, knows about. Those who don't know might actually think this is the principle of the Red of Solitude. But M knows that this guy still ate the vampire fruit for lifespan in the future, so as long as the devil fruit ability is strong enough, this guy won't refuse. Farsight ability is suitable for reconnaissance, X-ray vision ability also seems suitable for reconnaissance, mind reading can be used for interrogation. No. M suddenly realized that his understanding of the Glint fruit's ability was a bit narrow. He was only thinking about things from the ninja world. He was a transmigrator. So, looking at it from a modern person's perspective, X-ray vision is extremely helpful in medical treatment and biochemical aspects. Also, farsight combined with X-ray vision can be used to explore underground mineral vein resources. Looking down from a distance of 4,000 kilometers, you'd know what's there. Thinking of this, M increasingly felt that the direction of his thinking was correct. The Glint fruit shouldn't be given to frontline combat personnel, but rather to logistics technicians. Of course, it's best if they have a certain level of combat capability. Medical treatment, biochemical, or vein exploration, interrogation. Is there anyone who meets these requirements? A few seconds later, M's eyes lit up, because he thought of someone who was afraid of death but indeed had a certain level of combat power and strong survival ability. It's him. So, next, he had to consider Redfield matter again. He doesn't want to eat the Glint fruit, no problem. Just have a Glint fruit ability user assist him. But it would be best to give him a devil fruit that is somewhat helpful for the pursuit of Ren and whose ability upper limit is worthy of this red count. Previously, M had read the devil fruit record book in the Holy Land Treasury and naturally memorized it all. Now he just needed to recall it. There's actually this devil fruit? How did such an awesome fruit end up outside in the future? Actually, he had already thought of the reason himself. 8 out of 10 times, it was given away by those celestial dragons. Separation line 2 days later, Red Line Zone RL 1557, which is where the Stargate base for Demon Slayer World number 0002 is located. Because it was still in a state of war with the Titan world, This place was not only surrounded by tall stone walls at this time, but also had hundreds of thousands of army units stationed there. When Redfield and Ms. Nkibutsuji followed Captain Rasky of Cypher Pol 9 agent and walked in through the huge city gate tunnel, large numbers of black-clad soldiers, suit-wearing, rapidly moving Cypher Pol agents, tank clusters lying on the crimson ground like giant beasts, and distant heavy howitzers came into view. This spectacular scene on a large battlefield couldn't help but make people marvel in their hearts. However, neither Redfield nor Ms. Nkibutsuji showed any of this, but instead coldly scanned a circle before withdrawing their gaze, then continued walking forward, following Lucci ahead. Before long, they arrived at a piece of flat open ground and saw a monoplane with a fuselage length of about 30 meters. This was one of the achievements of the Academy of Science over the past year. They first quickly mastered the manufacturing technology of the biplanes from the Demon Slayer world, and then renovated this large monoplane that strongly resembled a B-17 bomber. Because many special materials and technology were used, and it had the blessing of the float fruits ability, it was stronger than a regular bomber in all aspects, whether it was endurance, speed, armor, or firepower. Are we going to ride this thing to pursue that other world brat named Ren? Redfield, dressed in red clothes and a red cloak, held a purple umbrella sword in his hand and said, recalling a delicate sketch in his mind. Hearing his question, Lucci explained softly with a respectful attitude. Yes, we will take this airplane into the third other world, then find a way to get a world map, determine the position of Paradis Island, and then find someone there who knows him. We will trouble you to check the other party's memory to confirm Ren's actual appearance and whereabouts, and then proceed with the next pursuit operation. Sounds a bit complicated, Redfield said with some displeasure, but Lucci smiled and said, actually, the most troublesome thing is Ran Yeager's future sight ability, because our capture operation must have already been known to him. Ms. Nkibutsuji lazily gazed in the direction of RL 1558 area and sneered. Humphrey, he's just a little mouse that only knows how to scurry around everywhere, although among the three, his strength should be the weakest. Ever since he fully joined the world government, this former demon progenitor gradually regained his former arrogance. Chapter 455, Ms. Nkibutsuji's helplessness. Titan World, the central area of the Black Peninsula. A space-time gate, 300 meters high and 200 meters wide, stood tall on the dry loess ground, its edges emitting a faint starlight. Behind it, to the east, had become a lava hell with magma flowing everywhere. To its north and south, tens of thousands of wall titans, stretching for over 10 nautical miles and standing 60 meters tall, were pushing forward in neat formations amidst thick steam. However, in front of this giant army, known as the Rumbling, two difficult-to-breach defense lines had appeared. North side. Bullet had merged with the earth to form a massive combined giant. This big monster, predominantly yellowish-brown, was hundreds of meters tall. Each time it clapped its hands, it could crush countless wall titans into meat paste. South side. Crocodile created a terrifying quicksand environment, like a giant mouth opening on the ground. Any wall titan that stepped into it would be sucked deep underground. In the air, Borsalino was slacking off. As the World Alliance Army's defense line position to the west was simultaneously attacked by multiple forces including Garp, Newgate, Linlin, and Kaido. The focus of the cannon fire had long shifted away from the Stargate. Naturally, the incoming cannonballs and thunder spears were also becoming fewer. Yet, he maintained a posture of holding his position as long as anything was still flying towards him. Oh my! Just as Borsalino kicked a thunder spear into pieces, he suddenly noticed a large monoplane rushing out from above the Stargate, then swiftly sweeping past below him towards the battlefield in the west. What a powerful aura! However, this aura felt very unfamiliar to him. Logically, he should know most of the top experts in the Sea Star world. Therefore, he could only guess that the world government had deployed hidden powerhouses again. Inside the cabin, Redfield withdrew his gaze from the round window and looked at Captain Rasky beside him, asking, "Have you determined where their command center is?" He felt that to find the world map or determine the position of Paradis Island, it would be best to directly find these military higher-ups. "I'm very sorry, not yet." Captain Rasky was a bit embarrassed. Although he wasn't responsible for this matter, as a member of Cypher Pol, failing to find the enemy's command center by now was indeed a loss of reputation. However, he still explained. The main reason is that the auras of these other worlders are all roughly the same strength, making it difficult for us to search using observation hockey. Coupled with a language barrier and unfamiliar writing, capturing a captive for interrogation is also impossible. Furthermore, we believe that low-level soldiers wouldn't know the location of the command center. Redfield didn't say much after hearing this, silently falling into thought. This was his first mission after joining the world government. No matter what, he had to complete it successfully, otherwise, what about his reputation? Since that's the case, why not go directly to the enemy's capital? I refuse to believe that someone wouldn't know where the capital of their own country is. Suddenly, Mizun Kibutsuji interjected. His suggestion piqued the interest of the other two, as it sounded quite reasonable. Their goal was to find Paradise Island, so finding the capital of a large country and asking the nobles there would suffice. You're quite good. What's your name? Redfield looked at Mizun Kibutsuji with interest. This was the first time he had truly looked at the other party. He had previously heard that he was an otherworlder who ate the glint fruit that he had refused, and his aura wasn't very strong, so he hadn't paid much attention. Mizun felt speechless upon hearing this, even slightly angered, because he remembered introducing himself once before, but the other party hadn't taken it to heart at all. However, he maintained a smile on the surface, naturally repeating his name and identity with a calm expression. He had no choice. Captain Rasky had warned him before that the strength of this Red of Solitude was much stronger than crocodiles, ranking at Admiral-level combat power. Having been in the Sea Star world for so long, Mizun naturally understood what Admiral-level combat power meant. But who would have thought that after Redfield heard his words, he would look at Mizun Kibutsuji meaningfully. Don't be resentful just because you are underestimated by a strong person. All respect and equality come from strength. However, you are very smart, you haven't let your emotions override your reason. From this perspective, you can also be called outstanding. Mizun Kibutsuji was stunned for a moment. Immediately, a strong chill rose in his heart. Can this person hear what I'm thinking? He was actually quite familiar with this kind of thing. Back when he was the demon progenitor, he could hear the heart voice reading of those demons. Redfield didn't hide it, his mouth curving into a smile. He laughed. That's right, I know what you're thinking. Mizun Kibutsuji's mood was complicated. He never expected that he would encounter such a thing. At the same time, he felt even more awe towards Red Count, quickly adjusting his mindset. Then he remembered that the glint fruit also had the ability of mind reading. However, this ability required making an OK gesture with one's fingers first, then bringing it to the eyes to activate the effect. To be honest, Mizun felt it was very low. He really didn't want to do such a ridiculous action, and this method had no concealment whatsoever. Especially now, he truly didn't dare to do such a thing to Redfield. You're thinking correctly. If you dared to do that, I would kill you directly. Redfield laughed playfully. He suddenly found this person, who was said to have been the strongest in one world and was now the so-called perfect being, quite interesting. Clearly very angered and unwilling, yet so obedient. His mindset of completely prioritizing living, without any attitude of a powerhouse, was truly interesting. Cough, Lord Redfield, let's just use normal communication with words. Mizun Kibutsuji pleaded with a bitter smile. What else could he do? He definitely couldn't win in a fight. Hey, alright. Redfield stopped teasing him. He then ordered Captain Rasky. Go down and grab someone who looks like a military officer and bring them up. Yes. Captain Rasky naturally didn't refuse. He directly pulled open the cabin door with one hand and jumped out, simultaneously generating a pair of scarlet bat wings formed entirely from blood behind him, then flew rapidly towards the war-torn battlefield below. A mythical zone bat fruit, vampire form, huh? A bit interesting. For some reason, Redfield felt a strange feeling looking at Rasky, but he couldn't quite articulate what kind of mood it was. It was just very odd, and his gaze was unconsciously drawn to him. Mizun Kibutsuji also saw Rasky use his devil fruit ability for the first time and asked curiously. May I ask what your ability is? Hey, a very interesting ability, one that is worthy of me. You will witness it soon. If you're interested, you can try to guess during the process. Mizun Kibutsuji's head was full of black lines, but he didn't dare to press further. Soon, Captain Rasky returned to the cabin, holding a young military officer wearing a silver-gray helmet and with a pistol holster hanging at his waist. The man's face was full of terror and despair, and he was frantically shaking his hands and saying something. Redfield had no interest in communicating with him. His gaze fixed on the other party's eyes, and then he activated memory reading, one of his two innate special abilities. During this process, he didn't need to understand the other party's language at all, because his second special ability, heart voice reading, would also activate simultaneously. Heart voice reading, heart voice reading. This was consciousness communication when the spirits of both parties were connected. Naturally, he could understand the meaning the other party wanted to express. To be honest, Redfield's special observation hockey ability was actually easier to use than the glint fruit's mind reading ability. This was also why he looked down on the glint fruit. As for the far sight of 4,000 kilometers and the X-ray vision that could see through a person inside and out, they were worthless in his eyes. Soon, he found the location of the capital from the mind of this young squad captain from Marley. However, he saw something even more valuable, a world map and a map of Marley, both marked with the position of Paradise Island. As a military officer, maps were definitely something he had seen many times. "Thank you very much for your cooperation. You may leave now." Redfield lightly pat the other party's shoulder, then signaled Captain Rasky to throw him out of the cabin. At the same time, he took out a purple handkerchief from his small jacket pocket and carefully wiped each finger on his right hand. A moment later, the airplane began to turn, heading north. Chapter 456, The First Diplomatic Contact Between the Two Sides. The actions of the Ryderfield squad attracted the attention of many big shots. Among them, Im was the most worried person, as his understanding of Ren's ability was the deepest. While the simulator doesn't provide much increase in combat power, if used for hide-and-seek, it's truly a shamelessly effective cheat. Because he could already see who would catch him, how they would catch him, and where he would be caught. Therefore, the difficulty of capturing him was quite high. But if he wasn't captured soon, even if the World Alliance Army's 10 million troops were wiped out, they would still face the endless, basically unkillable the rumbling. Still need to figure out Ren's current age and how much lifespan he has left. If it really lasts for 1 or 2 years, the trouble won't be small. Im sighed inwardly. The world government would face 2 possible situations next. One is failing to capture Ren and having to silently resist the continuously surging the rumbling until his life reaches its end. The second is successfully capturing Ren and then conducting a public execution of him facing the 4 worlds, while simultaneously stopping the activation of the rumbling. However, he cannot actually die during the execution. Because if he dies, the strength of the Attack Titan, Founder Titan, and Warhammer Titan will randomly disperse among newborn Eldian babies until they automatically activate one day. This means the world government would lose the strength of these 3 Titan shifters for the next 10+ years. Im still used the canon content as intelligence reference, so he didn't know that Ren had already gathered all the 9 Titans onto himself. So, if Ren were accidentally killed, the world government would temporarily lose not just the strength of 3 Titans, but all the Titan strength. Fortunately, to preserve the strength of the 3 Titans, he specifically ordered the 5 elders to issue a command to Ryderfield and his 2 companions that they must capture alive Ren. Divider Titan World. A monoplane, vastly different from the mainstream biplanes of this world, flew along the eastern coastline of Marley, all the way to the exchange port of Paradise Island. It continued flying inland, on the island, under the gaze of many astonished eyes below. This situation was quickly transmitted via telegram by the port's official to the central government within Sina Wall. Clearly, the speed of electromagnetic wave was much faster than that of an airplane. Not long after, the higher-ups of the New Eldian Empire all knew that the invaders from the other world had arrived. Since that's the case, let's proceed according to the plan specified by Ren. As the first queen of this newborn country, Historia Rice took a deep breathing, her fair face full of determination and courage. Not long ago, after Levi returned from Marley, he suggested to her that to preserve the royal bloodline, she should immediately leave Paradise Island and find the deep mountains and old forests to live in seclusion. She refused immediately. Because Queen Historia felt that as a king chosen by the citizens, she should not abandon them and escape at this time. The royalty of the Eldian people, even if they were to go extinct, should be together with the Eldian people. Moreover, didn't Ren say he wouldn't die? Yes. Hearing the Queen's order, Erwin Smith, who was now the president, and Levi Ackerman, who was now the commander of the Survey Corps, could only obey the order and act accordingly. Speaking of which, due to Ren's interference, this Erwin Smith did not unfortunately sacrifice himself as he did in the canon future. It's just unknown whether this was a good thing or a bad thing for him. After the 2 left the royal palace, they began making arrangements. Arrangements for what? A welcoming honor guard. This was the suggestion Ren had left them before. Do not resist, completely accept all of the other party's arrangements. However, to prevent the other party from having malicious intentions towards the queen, and also for the inheritance of the royal bloodline, he still suggested leaving beforehand. Although he already knew that Queen Historia would not agree, what needed to be said still had to be said. Whether she listened or not was her matter. A few dozen minutes later, that monoplane successively flew over Wall Maria and Rose Wall, finally stopping above the city gate of Sina Wall. It hovered there quietly, as if observing the central military police lined up in 2 rows below. In the middle of them, Queen Historia, wearing a golden crown and dressed in formal attire, stood at the front. Behind her were Erwin, Levi, Hans Zoe, and 7 or 8 other higher-up officials from the central government. Strangely, the monoplane did not land immediately, nor did anyone come down. This left the scene in silence, and the atmosphere became increasingly strange. This also made many central military police feel embarrassed and angry. They felt that the other party was showing contempt for their side. But Queen Historia showed no reaction. Her azure eyes simply looked calmly straight ahead, waiting silently. It wasn't until about 30 minutes later that the monoplane slowly landed on the open ground in front of the city gate. Then the cabin door opened, and 3 figures jumped down, 1 in front and 2 behind. The person leading them had a tall, slender build and a head of silver hair braided into 2 pigtails hanging over his shoulders. He wore a plum red shirt, blood red pants, black leather shoes with gold trim, and a large blood red cape draped over his shoulders. A large purple flower was pinned to his left chest, but none of this was as eye-catching as his wicked smile and gaze. His elegant, noble aura overshadowed even Queen Historia, the queen of a country so tall. Many on the Eldian side secretly clicked their tongues in amazement. This person's height felt close to 3 meters, didn't it? And the man in black behind him, wearing dark red sunglasses and with a slick back white hair, was definitely 2 meters tall. In comparison, the other man, wearing a beige uniform and with a gentle face and black hair, seemed quite normal. Their strange gazes made Mizunkibutsuji frown in displeasure, and killing intent gradually gathered in his eyes. Welcome, esteemed guests from the other world, to the Eldian Kingdom. I am the queen of this country, Historia Rice. Queen Historia placed her hands in front of her and spoke respectfully in greeting. What a peculiar aura. But Redfield did not respond immediately, because he immediately noticed something special about Queen Historia. It was an aura that made one's spirit feel incredibly calm. Lucci and Mizunkibutsuji also noticed this point one after another, so both looked at the other curiously. But this also caused dissatisfaction and humiliation among the surrounding Eldians. These central military police and central officials thought that the 3 were attracted by the queen's beauty. Even Levi's expression turned cold, and his right hand slowly moved towards the sword hilt at his waist. Just as the atmosphere became tense, Redfield chuckled lightly, completely unconcerned by these people's reactions and actions. He looked down at Queen Historia, whose height only reached his waist. He didn't say anything to her. After all, their languages were completely different, so talking would be pointless. Thus, he directly and quickly read the other's memory through eye contact. He quickly found the screen feed of Ren, which happened to match the sketch he had in his mind. Immediately after, he glanced at Levi, Erwin, Hange, and the others, naturally also knowing what Ren had said to Levi on the airplane earlier. Fly to the other side of the planet, huh? What a truly clever little kid. Redfield smiled and waved at Queen Historia and the others. Then, under their bewildered gazes, he turned and left. This made the Eldian side feel a bit flustered. Wait a moment, did we do something rude? Queen Historia quickly asked, but received no response. She could only watch speechlessly as the airplane took off again and left. She could only turn back curiously to look at Levi and the others. Why was that? Chapter 457, Infinite vs. Eternal. Days passed, the sun rising and setting in the sky. Garp, Newgate, Kaido, Linlin, and King Harold led Shiryu, King, Marco, Oven, Daifuku, Onigamo, Doberman, and a host of other elite officers. Supported by the 2,000-strong giant unit, the 300-strong Kabanrai troops, and the nearly 1 million army unit that had successively passed through the Stargate. On the western side of the peninsula, an unprecedented world-class offensive and defensive war unfolded against the World Alliance army of millions. 5 days had passed since Redfield and the other 2 left by airplane. The 12 super defense lines, which the World Alliance army had spent several years and an incalculable amount of wealth, resources, and manpower to construct, were now reduced to only 2 precarious lines under the pincer attack of the world government. As for the millions of troops that had previously possessed a magnificent aura, along with the spectacular scene of tens of thousands of heavy howitzers, hundreds of Thunder Spear armored vehicles, and the Air Force fleet composed of thousands of biplanes and airships, they had all been swept away. Among them, the heavy howitzers, Thunder Spear, and other heavy weapons and equipment were naturally confiscated. Sakazuki was directing the army soldiers to pull them into the Stargate, then hand them over to the team sent by the staff department for repair or recovery. As for the soldiers who resisted with guns, they were all slaughtered. There were so many corpses that the army had to allocate some military strength to carry them to the eastern side of the peninsula and then throw them into the magma lake to be completely burned. Huh, are they surrendering? In the command room of the command department on the Sea Star mainland, Marshal Ryman looked at the holographic projection on the desk in surprise. He saw 3 middle-aged men wearing white military suits and adorned with various medals on their chests walk out from the middle zone of the 8th defense line below, holding a white flag. Their faces were filled with fear and nervousness, and they trembled as they looked at Garp, Newgate, and the others not far away, as if facing a group of demons or monsters. These 3 were none other than Calvi, the Minister of Defense of Marley, Theo Magoth, the Army General, and Montenegro, the Fleet Admiral of the Middle East Alliance. As the highest representatives of the World Alliance Army, they requested surrender. They simply couldn't fight anymore. The rumbling couldn't break through the opponent's defense line and flood into their world, while their own defense lines couldn't stop the various incredible supernatural attacks of these other world monsters at all. Damn it, that damned Ren actually lied to us. Minister Calvi gritted his teeth and cursed inwardly. Since Ren had the ability of future sight, he must have known beforehand that they would be defeated, yet he still told them that this battle was sure to be won and that the rumbling was invincible? He truly believed his nonsense. How about I kill them for everyone? Across from them, Shiryu took 2 steps forward, biting a smoking cigar. His gaze scanned the surroundings, then grinned and asked. Although he was somewhat tired of killing these other worlders who were as weak as ants, he knew that these 3 individuals before him were definitely big fish, and killing them should obtain him a lot of military merit. But who among those present didn't understand this logic? He, no need to trouble you, I can do it myself. Crocodile, also holding a cigar in his mouth, walked out, a playful smile on his face. He didn't care at all about the dense killing intent emanating from Shiryu and his gradually turning crimson pupils. Since Kuzan had frozen the sea surface on 3 sides of the peninsula 2 days ago, he no longer needed to guard the Stargate and simply joined the attack on the defense lines. That's well said, it's exactly what I wanted to say to you, you stupid crocodile. At this moment, Bullet also spoke, a cigar in his mouth. He stood with his arms crossed over his chest, glancing at Crocodile, his black justice cloak fluttering in the gunsmoke-filled wind behind him. He and Crocodile were both Army Admiral candidates, so they placed great importance on this military merit. Both wanted to be promoted to the rank of Admiral before the other. Shiryu, on the other hand, hoped to become an Admiral candidate so he wouldn't have to be a KNU's adjutant anymore. Just like that, several people stood on the scarred battlefield, confronting each other without yielding, their imposing aura visibly rising. In the crowd, Armaki opened his mouth, wanting to say that he also wanted this military merit, but feeling the oppressive atmosphere, he didn't dare to speak. After all, he was currently just a small colonel. Command Department order, bring these 3 back to the homeland for detention. Everyone else is to be executed on the spot. Just then, Sakazuki's voice, filled with a sense of oppression, rang out from behind the group. His tall figure in a red suit attracted everyone's gaze. This also caused Shiryu, Bullet, and Crocodile to retract their aura. Suddenly, everyone felt the ground beneath their feet tremor, and the amplitude grew larger and larger. Edward Newgate, as an earthquake user, was most sensitive to this kind of tremor and immediately looked up towards the far west. It's not those things again, is it? This feeling was familiar to everyone present. Charlotte Oven said with a headache. After fighting for so many days, his stamina was starting to give out. But things always tend to develop towards the worst outcome. Indeed. Before long, rolling white mist and steam appeared on the distant horizon, obscuring the sky, and Sunday the thudding footsteps caused everyone to frown. It was the rumbling again. Row after row, the boundless wall titans advanced mightily, their scale far exceeding the previous 3-sided encirclement, because they were coming from the more expansive inland direction. If the rumbling was at most on a million scale, then these before them were the true millions scale sea of giants. This is troublesome now. Onigamo said in a deep voice, his expression grim. Because his stamina was also running low, he thought he could go back and rest soon, but he didn't expect the real combat had just begun. It wasn't just him and Oven. After 5 or 6 days of war, slaughtering nearly 10 million people and facing the bombardment of nearly 10,000 various heavy cannons, most of the vice admirals and rear admirals were already very fatigued, except for monsters like Garp, Newgate, Linlin, Kaido, and Bullet. Even Crocodile and Shiryu now needed at least 1 or 2 days of rest to recover their energy and stamina. You guys go back and rest first, leave this to me. Just then, Sakazuki walked towards the rumbling alone, but Garp frowned and said to him. You're not planning to create an active volcano, are you? Besides this, is there any other way now? Sakazuki stopped, turned back to look at Garp, and retorted, then stated his idea. According to the intelligence provided by the command department, there are at least tens of millions of these giants, and it's even very likely they are infinite. I personally believe that sending you up to confront them is purely a meaningless waste of stamina. Since that's the case, isn't using several eternally erupting volcanoes and magma to block these almost infinite giant army the best choice? Garp also knew that what he said made sense after hearing it. It was just that, doing so would also directly ruin the environment of this area. He knew that Sakazuki could at most create active volcanoes, but couldn't control their disappearance afterward. Forget it, this old man will just punch the volcanoes to explode later, and then have that kid Kuzan come over to put out the fire. Chapter 458, Kong Ming vs. Ren. Otherworld Strategy Committee. Ever since the small Stargate was upgraded to a medium Stargate and the world government's war of conquest against the Titan world fully commenced, they had shifted from a frontline department to a second-line one. After all, with an army of such a large scale, they truly didn't have the authority to command it. That responsibility fell solely to the command department. But this didn't mean they had nothing to do. While they couldn't directly intervene in the war, they showed no slack or relaxation in gathering intelligence from the enemy world. Under the command of the Otherworld Strategy Committee, a large number of men in black belonging to Cypherpol took advantage of the Stargate's increased size, using various means or vehicles to travel to various places in the Titan world. Although their language and writing were different, they could observe, ponder, and think, as they were all professional agents. The mission of these men in black was to use visual dendenmushi to transmit the development levels of the various countries back to the command hall in the homeland, and then find a way to locate their capital and infiltrate it. In addition to this, Chairman Fernandez, Vice Chairman Kong Ming, and others also organized a batch of linguists to begin research on the Marlian language of the Titan world. While they couldn't expect quick results, they definitely had to get started. There were currently two key problems before them. First, although their side now had Redfield and Mizunki Butsuji, who could understand the enemy's thoughts, they couldn't make the enemy understand what their own side wanted to express. This communication barrier was too great and would certainly affect the subsequent conquest and development, so a solution had to be found. But after thinking for so long, they truly had no clue. Unless they could find that Parimsha system language fruit, then they would have a useful bilingual translator on their side, but where could they find it at this juncture? Second, it was still related to Redfield and the others, specifically the arrest mission against Ran Yeager that they were currently undertaking. This matter was primarily the responsibility of the Otherworld Strategy Committee. But it had already been 5 days, and the pursuit was still ongoing, with no hope of capturing the person in a short time. Chairman Lucci mentioned in his report that although the Red Count's ability can determine Ren Yeager's escape direction, due to the distance of half a planet between the two sides and the not-so-large gap in airplane sailing speed, it is difficult to catch up to the opponent in a short time. Vice Chairman Gabriel briefly explained the situation. The monoplane that Redfield and the other two were riding was certainly faster than the biplane Ren and his group were riding, but this difference was not enough to close the distance of half a planet in a short time. Although the two sides were indeed slowly approaching each other, the world government did not want to drag this out with Ren for a year or two. It must be known. During this process, the rumbling was continuous, and Ren could also summon wall titans from other places at any time. Damn it, this Ran Yeager truly utilizes the future sight ability to the extreme. Vice Chairman Maron Wyfried, sitting across from Vice Chairman Gabriel, said resentfully. Scholars from the Academy of Science calculated based on the flight speed of the biplane and our monoplane that even if Red Count and his group can stay close behind them, it will take at least 1 or 2 months to close the distance between the two sides to about 1,000 kilometers. Furthermore, we have reason to suspect that Ran Yeager has already prepared replacement airplanes full of gasoline in various countries, while our monoplane here requires Red Count and his group to find a way to replenish fuel. Vice Chairman Hobson Samuel sighed deeply, looking at the document in his hand filled with various mathematical formulas. It must be said. Although this Ran Yeager was an otherworlder, they had to admit that this kid was a genius, and he had given them a vivid lesson, the subject being how to play with the future sight ability. Compared to this, their side's Kageya Yashiki's future sight paled in comparison. Every use consumed lifespan, and it could only be used a few times a year. Moreover, activating the ability in the world required members of the Demon Slayer Corps as a medium. Just as the people present were discussing amongst themselves with worried expressions, Chairman Fernandez, who was sitting in the main position, noticed that Kong Ming was deep in thought, his feather fan not even moving. He immediately asked, "Kong Ming, do you have any ideas?" Hearing the sound, the 4 vice chairmen immediately fell silent, focusing their gaze on Kong Ming. The latter didn't mind, fanning himself with his feather fan while saying thoughtfully, "I'm thinking, since the main reason we can't catch up to Ran Yeager in a short time is due to speed, then we just need to accelerate our side's pursuit speed. No matter how powerful the opponent's future sight ability is, what can he do in the face of an absolute speed gap and combat power gap?" Vice Chairman Hobson Samuel heard this and said helplessly, "The problem is that even the monoplane renovated by the Academy of Science is difficult to catch up in a short time. Indeed, and don't forget, among the opponents, there is also a so-called Colossal Titan who possesses an explosion ability that can kill Burndie World. Looking at the data on the Warhammer Titan and Beast Titan in the intelligence, they are also not to be underestimated." Vice Chairman Gabriel nodded, agreeing with his statement, and continued. "Kong Ming, there hasn't been any Titan shifter appearing on the Western Front right now, which indicates that 8 out of 10 of the hosts of those Titan shifters are accompanying Ren Yeager. We must be on guard. Kong Ming did not deny it, and said calmly. I have considered these points. Therefore, I hope to apply to Minister Kong of the Command Department to have Air Force Admiral Kizaru join this arrest operation. Kizaru? Chairman Fernandez raised an eyebrow, looking at him in surprise. Yes. Admiral Kizaru is a Logia user of the Glint fruit ability. In his element transformation form, he can achieve straight-line light-speed movement. Of course, calling it movement, in our eyes, it is actually flashing. Kong Ming looked at another document containing relevant information about Borsalino, specifically requested from Fleet Admiral Sengoku, and calmly stated his thoughts. However, in order to confirm his position, Admiral Kizaru will only move at light speed within the range of his observation hockey, and there must be no obstacles along the way. If there are, he will use Yata no Kagami to refract his movement. Chairman Fernandez and the others listened attentively to Kong Ming's every word. According to the information on this document, the maximum distance Admiral Kizaru can flash each time is about 10 kilometers. So we can have Red Count and his group maintain contact with him, and then have Red Count and Mizan Kibutsuji use their abilities to guide Admiral Kizaru to the location of the airplane Ren Yeager is riding. However, one point must be noted, Admiral Kizaru and Red Count's airplane must always be on the same directional line. Only then can they catch up to Ren Yeager by continuously flashing at light speed. Finally, Lieutenant General Kong Ming stood up, scanning the 4 colleagues present, his eyes shining with the brilliant radiance of confidence and wisdom. Furthermore, according to the intelligence provided by the 5 elders, the so-called power of the Titans on Ran's side does not have the means to harm Logia users, so we do not need to worry about Admiral Kizaru's safety. Chapter 459, Boeing Archipelago and the Yubu Yashiki Sisters. The method devised by Kong Ming, written as a detailed report document under the name of the Otherworld Strategy Committee, was sent to the 5 elders' room of authority, and then St. Topman Warcurry personally reported it to Lord Imu. At this time, the Noah's Ark had already left the moon and was slowly flying 6,000 meters above the world. Vegapunk, along with 10 automatons, had also returned to Punk Hazard, leaving only Dr. Tsukimi and 20 or so researchers on the Moon City to continue their research. The security mission was handed over to 2 flying warships sent by the Air Force. Kizaru, Redfield, and Mizan Kibutsuji cooperating with each other. How interesting. After listening to St. Topman Warcurry's words, Lord Imu marveled in his heart. On the surface, he calmly approved the method. It wasn't until the transponder snail closed its eyes again that his expression relaxed. Immediately, he had the visual Den Mushi project Kong Ming's data into the air, looking with interest at the virtual image holding a white feather fan before him. Kong Ming, this name, this image, I really don't know how to comment. So, could that flower country possibly have people like Guan Yu and Zhao Yan? But no matter what, Kong Ming had indeed come up with a good idea for the world government. Before this, Lord Imu had also been struggling to figure out how to capture Ren Yeager or how to deal with the endless the rumbling. But the best method he could think of was to adjust the location of the Stargate on the world side, either moving it to Ragin Island, which had countless thunderstorms all day long, or placing it directly on the sea in the calm belt to provide an extra meal for the Sea Kings. Anyway, according to the intelligence gathered by Cypherpol in the Titan world, the current time point in that world was mid-May of the year 2000 in the Gregorian calendar, which was mid-May of year 857 on Paradis Island. Based on this, Ren Yeager should be 22 years old now. According to the rule that the successor of the power of the Titans can only live for 13 years, Ren could only live until next year at the latest. However, as mentioned before, if the world government wanted to obtain Ren's power of the Titans, namely the Founder Titan, Attack Titan, and Warhammer Titan, they could not kill him, nor could they let him commit suicide or die of old age. Otherwise, these powers of the Titans would randomly be inheritance by certain Eldian infants and awakening one day. It was somewhat similar to the reincarnation mechanism of devil fruits. Lord Imu, in 10 minutes, the Ark will arrive at the Boeing Archipelago. Stussy stepped onto the expensive red carpet and walked to the front, respectfully reporting. Like Saul, the current commander of the giant god soldiers, she had already learned Lord Imu's true name and approximate identity, and naturally, her attitude towards him had become even more reverent and cautious. Lord Imu casually hummed in acknowledgement, his thoughts shifting from the Titan world to the Boeing Archipelago. He asked coldly, "When will the Marines and the Agricultural College people arrive?" Vice Admiral Momunga, who was responsible for escorting the botanists from the Agricultural College and Tentante tribe members, said it would take about 2 weeks. Understood. Lord Imu was not surprised by this. Marine warship speed was certainly not as fast as flying warship speed. As for why the Marines were responsible for the escort, it was mainly because there weren't enough flying warship, The Titan world and the moon had taken up most of them. The remaining ones were either inside this Noah's Ark or stationed at Holy Land Marijawise or the Air Force headquarters in Elbai. Moreover, the Air Force was not suitable for staying on the Boeing archipelago to be responsible for guard mission. Immediately after, Stussy softly asked again. Lord Amu, the 4 sisters of the Yubuyashiki family have completed all the required training content for maids. May I ask if they should be brought here to formally begin work? You may. Lord Amu nodded. He was actually quite looking forward to it. It was a slight satisfaction of his collection hobby. However, mentioning the Yubuyashiki family immediately reminded him of a matter. How is Shirley from Fishman Island? Actually, if there were results for these matter, they would certainly be included in the regular report. But since he thought of it temporarily, it was more convenient to ask Stussy, who was responsible for secretary work. Reporting, Lord Amu. The scalloped hammerhead shark mermaid, Shirley, and her mother, the scalloped hammerhead shark mermaid, Madame Majiti, have arrived at Wano Island under the escort of the Marines and have successfully settled into the Yubuyashiki estate. Lord Amu casually asked. What is the Yubuyashiki side's attitude? They were very surprised by their mermaid identity but had no resistance. Their attitude was very kind and friendly. Mr. Kageya Yubuyashiki even claimed to have felt a familiar aura from Shirley. Stussy answered softly, recounting everything. That's good. Have the Yubuyashiki 4 sisters prepare. They will accompany me for a stroll around the Boeing archipelago later. Lord Amu slowly stand up. He had already noticed that the Noah's Ark was decelerating. Ever since Stussy learned his identity, he had been too lazy to refer to himself as Saint. Saint and Royal were exclusive suffixes used by others to refer to the celestial dragons. Using them for himself was actually not very suitable, it was like lowering his own level. So, it was better to just use I. However, Lord Amu had thought about whether he should learn from Ken Shi Huang and refer to himself as Imperial I or this solitary one, but it always felt a bit strange. Soon. The Noah's Ark, like a sky island, hovered above the Boeing archipelago, which was shaped like a green flower. Its excessively large volume obscured the brilliant sun, casting a vast shadow that enveloped everything below. This caused the various giant insects and large carnivorous plants on the island to roar incessantly with extreme uneasiness. Large numbers of birds were also infected by this atmosphere of nervousness, flapping their wings and flying away into the distance one after another. This Boeing archipelago was not actually an island, but a super-large carnivorous plant with the scientific name stomach barren. It would grow vast forest and various delicious food plants emitting temptation fragrances on its body. For example, waterfall-like ramen lakes, spaghetti growing on grass blades, or bacon and ham hanging from branches, thereby attracting sea kings or sea beasts from the sea to forage on the island. When their numbers were sufficient, it would close its petals, swallowing all the meat on the island into the red hole located in the center, which was its mouth. Not only that, because the delicious food plants it grew contained rich nutrition, there were also various insects several meters long or dangerous carnivorous plants on the island. Furthermore, the closer one got to the periphery, the stronger the strength of these peculiar insects and plants became. The key was that this Boeing archipelago seemed to be able to control these bugs and plants and would not attack the sea beasts attempting to move inward. Therefore, when Lord Demut teleported to the outer seaside area of this island, he immediately felt the scent of various delicious food rushing towards him. Moreover, these scents seemed to be mixed with some kind of temptation components. To be honest, this place reminded him of a very similar other world. A powerful world that the current world government absolutely could not defeat, a terrifying world so strong that once he confirmed its identity, he would immediately close the Stargate without a second thought. Nice to meet you for the first time. We are the Yubuyashiki 4 sisters. Please guide us, Lord Amu. At this moment, 4 gentle and soft lily voices sounded in the court in unison. Lord Amu turned around to look and saw 4 quadruplet sisters, all with short white hair, wearing purple kimono, and adorned with different flowers on their heads, standing neatly in a row and respectfully bow to him. Immediately after, they raised their heads and introduced themselves one by one from left to right. I am the eldest daughter, Hingaki Yubuyashiki. The first one was the girl on the right side wearing a red flower ornament in her hair. I am the second daughter, Nichika Yubuyashiki. This was the girl on the left side wearing a yellow flower ornament on her head. Then the girl on the right side wearing a wisteria flower ornament on her head said, I am the third daughter, Kanata Yubuyashiki. Finally, the girl on the left side wearing a small purple flower on her head said softly, I am the fourth daughter, Kuina Yubuyashiki. Chapter 460, The problem of interworld communication is solved. Stargate number 0003 World has been granted the code name Giant by the world government. This means that from now on, Titan World is the officially recognized name. At this moment, Red Field, Lucci, and Mizan Kibutsuji were flying at high altitude in a monoplane. However, the atmosphere inside the cabin was very oppressive and heavy. The three of them sat in their seats with cold faces, not saying a word. The pursuit process over the past few days could not be called pleasant. Even though Redfield could rely on his devil fruit ability to firmly track Ran Yeager's location, he just couldn't close the distance to within 4,000 kilometers. Otherwise, Mizan Kibutsuji would have already seen the target using his glint fruit ability. This made the three of them feel increasingly frustrated. But what they didn't know was that this atmosphere also made the pilot in front, who was in charge of controlling the plane, subconsciously nervous. Large beads of cold sweat involuntarily seeped from his back, but he still mustered his courage and said with a trembling voice, "Report, island detected ahead. It should be Shizuru Nation marked on the map." These past few days, whenever this airplane landed in a country along the route to refuel, Redfield would conveniently grab two local people, read their memories, and then have them read out the names of the main countries on the world map, which he would then transliterate and mark in English language. At the same time, Captain Rasky also discovered that the continent structure of this world seemed to be the opposite of the Kubenrai world and Demon Slayer world they had experienced before, like a mirror image. For this, he specifically asked Mizan Kibutsuji to confirm it. "Humphrey, that other world kid seems to have transferred planes in this country again." Redfield snorted unhappily. They already knew that Ren Yeager had indeed prepared biplanes with ample gasoline and supplies in advance at the ports or airports of many countries. Then what are we waiting for? Let's go down and take a look. There was no other way. They also needed to replenish gasoline, as well as food, fresh water, and so on. Okay. The pilot breathed a sigh of relief upon hearing the instruction, then respectfully said, "Then please guide me on the route." Redfield nodded. Where this airplane flew and where it landed all needed him to use his feeling to command. He didn't stand up, but sat in his seat, using his observation hockey to perceive the airplane's position, occasionally stating the direction and distance verbally. These directions and distances were blurted out completely based on the world map in his hand. He didn't seem to be doing any thinking or analysis, but neither the pilot, Lucci, nor Mizan had any doubt. Indeed. Not long after, the pilot saw a large port appear not far ahead. Behind the port was a vast and flat large airport. He immediately began to increase altitude. This was experience. Because he had encountered anti-aircraft gun attacks from below several times before, combat was not part of his mission, he was only responsible for ensuring the airplane's safety. Redfield stood up and said indifferently to Lucci and Mizan, "My luck is running out." "Yes." "Understood." The latter two understood implicitly, knowing what this big shot meant. The next second, Redfield pulled open the cabin door with one hand and, without hesitation, turned into a streak of aura and leapt out. Lucci and Mizan remained in place, letting the gale blow their clothing and hair loudly, calmly looking down at the changes below. Bang 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 bang, without surprise, anti-aircraft gun cannonballs shot up rapidly, some towards their airplane, and some towards that streak of bright aura. The scene suddenly became lively. Boom, but when the aura, like a meteor, dragging a long fiery tail, was about 200 meters from the ground, it was like an exploding supernova suddenly erupting with visible crimson radiance. They were like an air current tsunami formed by the convergence of aura, overwhelmingly sweeping out in all directions. Wherever they reached, whether it was soldiers holding guns, artillerymen operating anti-aircraft guns, or military officers hiding in the control tower, they all rolled their eyes and fainted on the spot. When the aura dispersed, and when Red Count landed on the airport ground, everything quieted down. There were no more gunshots, cannon fire sounds, human voices, and even the sound of insects chirping disappeared. Only the sound of water spray shattering from the waves repeatedly hitting the shore, brought from afar by the gentle sea breeze, remained.